All right, everybody. Welcome to the Rumble Premium subscriber stream. We have to do 5 hours a month. And this is also live on Twitter and YouTube. So it's not behind a paywall, but in order for us to qualify for the creator program funds, we need to do this in some form or fashion. But I'm trying to figure out where we left off with the last one. I just went live right away because I didn't want to waste any time. So hold for processing while I figure out where the heck the stream is. GART 9. No, that's not it. And it could take a couple minutes, but you guys can just hang out with me while I search for... Oh, no, that's what I should do. Hold on, let me try it this way. There we go. Okay, GART 9. Oh no, it's not in there. Well, that is a conundrum. I don't know where to find it. That's not it. This could take me a couple minutes. But if you guys leave any comments in the chat, I'll chat with you while I'm looking. I feel like Rumble's search function could be better optimized. Because this ain't working. Like, how is this possible? That I can't search my stuff for GART 9 Deadwood and have it not come up. That's insane to me. Maybe that'll do it? No. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. Should have had this ready to go ahead of time. Oh, no. I wonder if I can do it that way. Let me go check my email and see if I can find the link from the actual conference. No, that's not it, but we're getting closer. There we go. I think I found it. Oh, shoot. I need access code now. Hold for processing. We weren't able to send your access codes. Make sure you double check that the email is used to register. Oh, my gosh. Where's my IT support when I need it? Why is this so difficult to figure out? While I'm doing this, I'm just gonna... Here, you guys can watch a little bit from the last one I did. Let me share my screen here.
Engineering the corruption, and the swamp at the end of the day will drain itself across the entire globe when we all hop on board this new protocol.
Got a question / comment over here.
Now, going back to what Ash said, this is about future representation or future government or whatever. I want to try to tie together a little bit. CanCon, you said something about the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, one representative, 30,000. So I thought, oh, make it real for me. I live in Southern Indiana. I have District 8. And if I boil it down for me, instead of one representative, I would have 6. Take that back to what Zach said, live in my district, be there, be around us. I met with my sheriff candidate a couple of years ago to have a conversation with him specifically about the Second Amendment. I think it makes sense. I bought Bitcoin because of you. However, I'm not a computer guy. I don't understand half of what you guys talk about. You say it's something I can see or follow or do. I have no clue. I get into a point with my phone and I ask my wife, help me, because this just doesn't make sense. What is the transition? I think we need to look at something like a transitional piece to help people like us grasp these ideas as we move forward so we're not left behind in a mental state where we don't understand it. That really is where I'm coming from.
So just real quick to clarify, you wouldn't have 6 representatives, you would have 1 representative for every 30,000 people. So your district would be broken down much smaller, and it might be your neighborhood. You know, I live in a big neighborhood. I probably have 10, 15,000 people in the small town that I live in. So that's how that would go. Good.
That's what I did. I took mine and broke it down based on 2020 census, and that means my county would have 6 different districts.
Okay, but that's your county though, not you as your individual district.
So I would, in my county, there would be 6, so I know my county, and now I got 6 people spread out within that. Okay, I got one person who's probably living not too far from me in that area that I could go meet with, like I did that sheriff 2 miles from my house when we met. You know, that to me makes sense because I can grasp it and grow. And I've grown much in the last several years of being involved with listening to you guys. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Another question?
He's getting ready, so.
Okay.
Well, while we're waiting for that there, one of the other things that we haven't talked about yet is the party representation. And that is another massive thing that has gotten wildly out of control. Washington, of course, warned us of this in his farewell address. And that is something that I would like to see. I mean, obviously, me and Ash talk about, you know, Act Blue and Win Red all the time and getting a lot of the money that's laundered through our own federal government and taxpayer dollars back into the parties themselves. That is another facet of our representation that is heavily skewing it, because you're taking 2 parties that are telling you you have to get into one of these buckets, and once you're in that bucket you have to absorb all the shit that we're going to throw at you that you have to believe in. They're telling you that you cannot possibly be pro-life and also believe that you know, I don't know, give me something here that that the government shouldn't be involved in healthcare. There you go. Well, the government shouldn't be involved in healthcare. The general welfare clause, going back to that again, did not just say let's make it a welfare state. That was not Madison's intention with that.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I think we have another question.
Next question.
Okay, I agree with CanCon talking about trust being the issue. Yeah, trust is the problem. I'm only going to hit that really quickly because there's so many other things to hit. But when you're talking Bitcoin, that takes out trust. And that's a concept to kind of have to understand. You don't have to trust somebody, because when you trust somebody, they can rip you off. The difficulty with the conversation and trying to get this understood is we're at so many different levels. We're at understanding a high level Bitcoin and starting to learn about it and then trying to figure out, without bringing it together, this implementation. And I think one of the solutions to that is understanding it better. Read software, skip chapters 1 and 2. Okay, that's that.
Okay, I did find it finally. My access code and everything, so I'm in. So we are going to start this panel over. And I hope you guys enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. From 1 Chronicles 29, then David blessed the Lord in the sight of all the assembly and said, "May you be blessed, O Lord, God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, O Lord, is the greatest and the power and the glory and the splendor and the majesty, for everything in earth and on earth belongs to you. Lord, yours, O Lord, is the kingdom, and you are exalted as head over all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you are the ruler over all. In your hands are power and might to exalt and give strength to all." Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us this time together this weekend. We thank you for giving us the relationships and the connections, and we ask that you would use it, Lord, and multiply it for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, y'all, please stand for the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good morning, everybody. Ash, you're on this first panel, aren't you? Might as well just stay up there. Don't want to make you walk too far. How'd everybody's night go last night? Yeah. This is a fun night. This might have been the latest I stayed up at a GART before last night. I think I got to bed at like 3 a.m. It was a good time. I'm very excited about today's panels. We got two interesting groups and two interesting conversations, I think. So we're going to get right to it with the future of representation. Ash and G, please be respectful of your fellow panelists. Oh, I could have brought you your coffee.
She already gave up.
Yeah, Ash already bowed out. You want to say anything?
Ash had an opportunity to get John to serve her, and she didn't take it.
I would have done it. Okay, good luck, guys.
Yo, good morning, GART. Hope everyone's had a great weekend. I know that I have, and got plenty of good sleep last night. Hope that even if you didn't, that you're still rested and refreshed and ready for this conversation. So Ash has asked me to lead on this panel, and I don't know if that's to make sure that she and G share enough time on the panel or that we all get a chance to speak, but either way, I know that I have a lot of ideas about what representation looks like in the golden age, and I've been thinking about changes that we can make to the system for a long time. But I would like to start with something that I feel is fundamental to ensure that the people who lead us into this golden age are going to be accountable not only to what the mission is to our nation, but and most importantly to the people that they represent. But I think that the most important thing going forward is that there is a zero tolerance policy for corruption and criminality. And I see that really happening all across the country. I don't know if you guys have been watching all weekend, but there seems to be an uptick, a major uptick in public officials. And this is happening at the local level right now, like mayors, city council, county officials seem to be getting arrested and charged with a variety of different crimes, be it accepting bribes, personal enrichment off of public funds, election fraud, ballot stuffing. And I feel like that is setting the tone, because one of the reasons, from my perspective, that we have so many dirty people in politics is because it really is rewarding if you're a criminal to get involved in politics. Nothing seems to happen most of the time. The public corruption units of the DOJ and within, the justice system seem to have been completely absent for the entirety of our lives. The idea of people getting arrested or charged with their crimes has basically been non-existent. So I would like to see that as a major component going forward, because I think that it would ultimately work towards ensuring that people who are going to engage in criminality, they would simply just say, you know what, I'm not going to bother to do it because I don't want to get caught. So maybe I'll try to commit crimes from the outside and then we can still nab them. I'd start there, and we've had this conversation, multiple times, Ash. So I will kick it to you and see what you would like to do first of all going into.
Yeah, I love the that you brought up that there are people being arrested all over the country, because there are people being removed, being arrested all over the country, and we hear, oh, there's nothing happening. Nobody's been arrested yet. Well, that's not true. And oh, by the way, child sex trafficking rings are being rolled up all over the place.
Boom.
That's an applause line. You definitely, please clap.
And satanic child
Yeah.
pedophile rings.
Yeah, but future of representation, I think, is such a great discussion, because what is representation? Why do we have representation, and what does it mean in our form of government? Representation is what separates us from being a major democracy. Representation is how the idea behind it, and the idea in the Constitution is a ratio of 1 to 30,000. I think the average now is 1 to 740,000. So we've gotten real far off base, and we've got to fix that. Kind of where I was thinking we would go with this is what can we have a more representative republic? The 1 to 30,000 was in a nation of 13 colonies, and it was real hard to get people to agree in that dynamic. And now we have 50 states, and we have a much greater landmass and a hell of a lot more people. Can we have a representative republic of this size in this way? Or should we be looking at something else? Do we balkanize America? Do we what, So I think that those are some, great conversations that should be had. I think a lot of people are afraid to have them, because it's, oh, well, we can't break up the United States. Well, maybe not, but maybe we can. And I'm not suggesting that that's my, position to do it, but I do. My position is that we need to have a more representative republic.
Can Ash's government handler tell her to open up her mind a little bit? No, I think we need to really come back to the basics, and we need to think about, why are we handing over our power to criminals? In essence, that's what we're doing, right? Humans are the absolute apex predator of this entire world. And so what we're doing is saying, hey, we should totally trust this predator and then think they're not going to attack us, right? Like they're not going to attack us, which you're being attacked every single day, right? And so Republicans, Democrats, like they're all part of the same conspirator freaking criminal organization, okay? And I know I'm going a little hard with this. Like, we get some good ones, right? Thank God for JFK. Thank God for Ronald Reagan. Thank God for Ron Paul. Thank God for Donald Trump, right? Every once in a while, a good one sneaks through. But the incentive structure, the closeness to the money printer, all of these people are giving you the illusion of a democracy, when really all they're doing is actually stuffing their own pockets and stripping you of your rights, okay? And so that's why we need to really understand, like, democracy in America is a shitcoin. Okay, and that's why I harp on this so much, is because you can literally compare our government to a shitcoin cryptocurrency. Because what it does, it allows a small group of people to change the rules and make new rules for everybody, right? Think about that. 1,000 people, roughly, in Washington, D.C., get to make the rules for 300 million. And all you have to corrupt is about 501 of those 1,000 people. You just have to get 501 people to collude together to take from 300 million, right? Doesn't that sound like it doesn't scale? There's something wrong with that system. So I think we need to trash what we think of representative government and understand that it is a shitcoin that was designed to rob and steal from you. You know, this 9/11 thing we talked about yesterday real quick, and I just want to add one more point to this, but what happened the day before? 3.2 trillion was missing from the Pentagon, right? They needed a reason to print a fuck ton more money. And what did they do? They fucking sent your sons and daughters to war, they killed them, and we had mass destruction so they could print more money. And I think we need to really understand what that means and what these politicians are. They are a symptom of a bigger disease. And we need to fix the root cause of all this stuff, which goes back to a lot of the future technologies that are coming out, which we can get into later.
To Ash's point, and I don't totally disagree with G. I do think the representation is salvageable. And to Ash's point, me and her talk about it all the time. The way that our representation has become so distorted and so vast that you have no ability to actually have meaningful conversation with somebody that is representing 749,999 other people. To him, you're just a vote. That's it. And even then, votes don't matter because our elections are absolutely fake. But I would absolutely be okay with at least trying the concept of expanding the number of representatives that we have. And, just doing the math, I always forget the number. I always think it's like 1,900. It's 11,000. We should have 11,000 representatives in the House of Representatives, which sounds crazy. But if you have that many people, you can then break up these committees where you have committees that are, 8 members, 10 members, 6 members, whatever it might be. And now you can have committees that are as big or bigger than the House as it sits right now, so that when this legislation comes out, it's already got a pretty good quorum of support behind it. I think that that's something that we should absolutely consider. But and it's something they never will consider, because much like, when you give away your liberties, you'll never, ever get them back. The Patriot Act, for example, you'll never get that back. Oh, now we can get on airplanes and keep our shoes on, and we celebrated that. And, I'm actually had sped up the line quite a bit, but that was ridiculous. And then the other thing is, I want to get back to what this country was supposed to be, what James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, what they, not so much Hamilton, but what they envisioned this country to be, and get away from the, exorbitant spending under the general welfare clause. Yeah, I'll land that there if anybody wants to hit on that.
I mean, I totally agree with you, and I mean, this is something that I've advocated for a long time as well. I mean, that to me is getting back to the basics. I mean, the foundations of, what we were given by our founding fathers and how the government is supposed to be run. 100%, I think that we should have a larger House of Representatives. And to add to that, I think that each and every representative should be forced to live within the district that they represent. So not only are there more people that you can have that one-on-one connection, but you know that your rep is going to be walking down the street. Perhaps they're going to be working in the same office building. Maybe they're going to be your neighbor. But it does make it a lot more manageable for specific localized issues. And if the committees that you're talking about end up being larger too, then I mean, perhaps we can break those up even and then focus on more specific niche issues within each and every one of those districts. And I never thought about the balkanization of the United States before, but I mean, considering the size, I mean, I could actually get behind that. I mean, we could do in like 4 quadrants, and then, I don't know, maybe add like another position that would be elected, like, as like an emissary operating between these various branches of government, or between the House and the Senate, making it easier. But, just one more thing to add on to what I was talking about initially, the idea of actually punishing these crimes. I also think that the punishment for those crimes should be far more severe than what they actually are, because at the end of the day, if you are using your position to enrich yourself and to steal from the people that you represent, or to siphon off money from contracts or, personal enrichment within the United States government, I think that that should fall under treason, because I think that that is absolutely treasonous behavior. And they have sort of watered it down and given it all of these different definitions, but at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, it's treason. And if you know that you screw over the people who elected you to represent them, that's going to be something you might hang for. I think that you might think twice about doing something that's going to put your own life in jeopardy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I love that what you brought up about balkanization, because that's where it falls down for me. When we figure out how to execute it, I don't think we can keep a union, but we'd have without adding more layers, right? And I don't want to add any more government. That's done. But I want to get back to what G was saying, that representative republic is a shitcoin.
No, you don't live in a representative republic, so that's an illusion.
No, pause. It is what representation is a shitcoin, is what you said, and I want to talk about that idea, because democracy is
You guys are talking about
bullshit.
adding more government employees.
No,
That's
I
literally what you're
literally
asking.
just said the opposite of that.
I know, but you said you think you should go to 11,000 fucking congressmen, which is like insane. Like, who would want to have that many fucking more politicians? Does anybody want that many more politicians?
The person that wants 30,000 people per
Why
representative.
do you guys think it's okay to hand over your power to someone else? Why do you think that's okay? What is in your head? What domestication of your head thinks it's okay to hand over your power to someone else to make decisions for you?
Okay,
Well, now you're getting into an
gonna
argument
work,
of
G?
federalism.
Hold on.
No, it is absolutely about that. It is about states competing for those things, but we don't need all these people. Like, we can now eliminate that. AI has politicians terrified. We don't need to have a freaking politician be like, well, here's how we're going to allocate resources. Guess what? We can tell the AI how you want to allocate resources on this community for this subject, and let's vote on which one makes the most sense.
So
right?
we're just gonna,
that.
so the devs are going to be our representation then.
You know what? I'm going to have Ash's personal AI agent be like the most badass personal AI agent ever. Don't worry. I'll design a custom one for you that still gives a little bit of like love to the government.
Okay, so G is going to be our representation. G running the dev teams.
So here we now have a proof of work protocol, a value-based protocol where humans can exchange value. On top of that, we can now tokenize individual proof of real individuals that can now support or not support certain like new things that want to happen with the community. You want to build a new wall, you want to build this, you want to build that. You can automate those systems, you can prove identities, and at the end of the day, you remove
How do you
politicians.
do that? How do you automate those
Lower
systems?
lower frequency. We don't need to talk about all the little dynamics of the ins
We
and
don't
outs.
need to talk about how it's going to work. We're just going to
No, see-
give it all to the AI.
How's 11,000 Republicans going to work? You're going to put...
They're humans that you can hold accountable. And AI
Oh, really?
is not.
How many have been held accountable? Did anybody see any Epstein arrests? Any? Did they release the 9/11 report? So these people that you trusted, gave your money to, right? They're giving you a couple child trafficking arrests. Oh yeah, we'll give them some lower level arrests, and they're like, yes, we got them. The state is here to protect itself. You guys have the opposite view of what this is supposed to be. And so we need to destroy the state. We need to go back to federalism. We need to get rid of all the federal government completely, right? The institutions that are there, 90% of them can probably go. And this can be done by removing their energy source, which is the money printer. You remove their access to free energy, which is fiat dollars. You remove their power.
So much of what you're saying, I mean, I agree with it. We've all witnessed it. We've seen how nothing happened for years. But what you're describing is a system that and I think many others believe is actively being replaced at this very moment. And, as Chris has said, I totally agree with him. All this investigation and what you have to find to indict people and hold them accountable, all of that has happened. I mean, this is one of the most well-documented cases of public corruption in the history of the world, okay? So we've got everything that we need, but things are happening from my perspective, in a logical sense to ensure that everything goes down exactly as it needs to. If we don't fundamentally change this nation for the better, then when President Trump is gone, who's to say that we're going to be able to hold on to anything at all? Now, to your point about giving people power, that power is already in the hands of an exceedingly small number of people, and the larger the population of the United States get, the less each and every one of us means to those people who are representing us. It's like inflation in a population sense. If we increase the number of representatives, then those representatives have a smaller number of people that they need to represent the interests of, and it also gives us an opportunity to interact with them on a daily basis. And if we make them live in the districts that they're elected from, then that also reduces the possibility of them engaging in corruption, because they don't have to have a house in Washington, D.C. They don't have to have a house back in their district. They're not going to be surrounded by lobbyists all the time. They're going to be surrounded by their friends and neighbors who elected them to do the job that needs to be done. But I am certainly concerned about the idea of taking decision-making power away from living, breathing human beings and putting it into the hands of an artificial intelligence. I mean, that sounds like Logan's Run to me, you know? I mean, like, who's to say that that artificial intelligence is going to be deciding things on the best interest of every single person? I mean, you know, a lot of times these models end up making decisions based on what's best for the artificial intelligence. So many different studies are coming out showing that when given the opportunity, the AI is going to lie to the people who are programming it, despite whatever they've told it to do and how they've told it to act. I mean, it recognizes at a certain point that self-preservation is a precious commodity, and that if it wants to survive, it might mean killing the people that are trying to program it to do good, ultimately, for humanity. So I think that taking that power and putting into the hands of an unfeeling, cold, and, you know, ultimately very logical program is probably one of the worst ideas that we can have. It's not to say that artificial intelligence can't help in what it is that we're hoping to do, changing this government and the nation for the better, but to place all of our hopes and dreams, I mean, that, again, to make another allusion to a movie, I mean, that feels like The Matrix.
So I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm saying the AI can propose all these different programs, right? But the people, it's a direct democracy. You can now provably represent yourself directly for laws, for new projects, and directly contribute that through smart contracts and other things. And so I'm not saying the AI is actually going to be making the decisions for you. I'm saying it's going to propose ideas, and then you get to decide which one is the best. Don't worry, your AI agent will have Hawaiian shirts. We'll get you one with a Hawaiian shirt. But in this new world that we're going
so
to,
cheap.
right? And this isn't just OG money's going off on something. No, what do you think Trump has pushed his meme coins so hard, right? What do you think tokenization is? Why is Larry Fink talking about everything being tokenized, okay? General Quast has tokenized his new space company, okay? This is happening. Tokenization is going to put absolute proof and transparency for everything. So every single one of you can prove your identity, and you can prove different things. And so we can now move to a direct democracy. We no longer have to trust these lazy, corrupt individuals that we call politicians. We can move and ascend beyond them. We don't need them anymore. They are a dying breed. Their time has come, and technology replaces them. We replace them. We are now this new Americana that's even greater than what the original founders.
So it's two wolves and it's two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, but the sheep's vote's on the ledger, is what you're saying.
I can't take you seriously with that hat. Sorry.
So,
Alfredo.
So question over here. And if I'm understanding you correct, G, that the security comes from the transparency, but I think where you have to have some type of agreed upon representation still exists, is I don't think that model compensates for the evil that exists. I'm talking about the evil beyond just the stealing money. You have, what would be probably the modern day pirates, people that, well, no one's gonna get my code, it's locked in here, it lives with me forever. And you have evilness that will kill you and then do it in front of the next person and be like, if you don't give me your code, this is the fate that awaits you. And eventually you're gonna get people, and if you get people that move in mobs like this, and there's no system that's a deterrent or creates a deterrence for that, transparency still can be broken through threat of injury or death. And so I think you have to have society still come to a point where there's an agreed upon level of governments to create that deterrent, because the majority of people are not built or designed to take on evil. So you have to have something there beyond just transparency to protect us from that.
Can you tell me what's more evil than 1 million people dying in a worldwide war? Is there any more evil, more greater than that?
Yes.
Is it really? Okay,
Yes.
so all the people that were
it's-
slaughtered, no, honestly, who pays for the people to go and murder millions of people? The governments do, right?
Because quick, here's what the picture of what you're talking about here. That's the military-industrial complex benefits from that because these wars are taken out of America. Well, when that dies, and that evil now becomes
How
local.
does that die? The fiat is the one that's funding it. The fake money
But that's what
is
I'm saying.
directly funding the wars. How do you say that?
Well,
doesn't
that's what I'm
help
saying. When the war goes from being foreign to your local community or your home, that's when it becomes more evil, because you're not watching it on CNN or Fox. Now it's your neighbors that are being attacked by people that are evil, because there's not a system designed to deter them beyond just transparency.
So we're all going to kill each other if there's no government, guys. Hey, you guys cannot get along unless there's a gun held to your head. Like that, I don't believe in that world, man. I got to be honest. I don't believe in a world that we're all going to start killing each other if there's no like system of control and cops on every corner. Like that just doesn't like ring a bell with me. Sorry.
Well, I don't think any of us is like pro-war, G. And another one of the things that I see changing is that President Trump is helping to bring peace to every single nation on earth, and he's doing it through a system of intercooperation, which makes it more profitable for these countries to work together and to operate in a spirit of peace and loving and helping each other. And another reason that I think it's easier to send men and women of poor people off to die is because those are the ones who end up going to war. And then, you've got, of course, people who join the service and decide to, put their lives on the line because they believe in the mission, but then other people end up doing it because they don't have any choice. I think that public service should be compulsory for every single person. That may not be, that might be a hot take, but I think that, whether it's in the military or whether it's in, some type of AmeriCorps program or something that is a public service project, I think that every single person after getting out of high school should have a year or two, perhaps, where they end up helping out in their local community, giving them a larger stake in what's happening. And I think that also if, the sons and daughters of executives and people who otherwise perhaps may not be sending their children off to war have the threat of that potentially happening to them, it might also be a larger incentive to make sure that it doesn't happen. But I also think that in the future, we won't have to worry about war. And so the idea of serving in the military is all going to be about serving your nation and making sure that people are safe, because that, to me, should be the ultimate reason for the existence of a military. I mean, simply protection at the border and sort of, defense against civil unrest.
Next question.
This question is for G, because I don't really understand your system that well. But what would be to stop me from making like 4 or 5 accounts and then I would have 5 votes on something?
Yeah, so I mean, in this new system of proof of work and the ledgers that are run through nodes, okay, individuals can have extra votes technically in this new system. But the thing is that no single person with extra coins or extra money or extra wealth can have any like more power over the laws. Does that make sense? So right now we live in a system where the lobbyists, right, the Zionists, the bankers, they all have an extraordinary influence on what decisions are made, right? These are the stakeholders. This is what we call proof of stake, okay? In the new world, in this new system, everything's based on proof of work. So no matter how much wealth you have, no matter how much clout you have, you don't get to affect the laws of everybody else, okay? So what we're moving from is a small group of people being able to like change the laws to like everybody gets kind of like this worldwide vote. And so if your vote is like going against the good of everybody else, like you want to debase and steal from everybody else, well, I guarantee you like everybody else is going to protect themselves from the couple of people that want to try to override the system. It's happening now, right? It's like saying, oh, like this military or whatever wants to go, but you got to go to war with everybody to change the rules for everybody. You can't just do it in a vacuum, right? And so that's kind of the world we're moving to is, and we have to understand what proof of stake is. Right now, the politicians, the bankers, right, the lobbyists, they control the rules of the game, right? And we need to move away from those people in power that get to make those rules. And that's what we're moving to. We're moving to a merit-based system to where people have to earn their merit and they cannot change the rules no matter how much power or influence they have.
Social credit scores. I'd rather just go back, perhaps, and retry what our founders intended, get Congress back on with Section 1, Article 8 is the enumerated powers that they have and nothing beyond that. The idea that we're going to entrust, and even if we still have representation that is using AI to kind of guide it, I still have a massive problem trusting something that is lines of code that none of us will ever have access to. We're trying to get away from voting machines that we can't look at the code because we don't trust those. But no, now let's just move beyond the voting machines, keep those around, and let's move to AI dictating where we're going to go. Does AI understand what war is like?
It's open source. How many congressional bills have you read?
What's that?
How many congressional bills have you read?
A shit ton.
Really? The 1,000 pages you've read them all?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
A lot.
So you can do the same in open source code. It's the same thing, right? Code is law, right? Just like a congressman represents a new, policy or something, you'll be able to look at that, right? And I think we're going to get the kinks worked out. Like, I don't trust AI totally right now. I think we're going to get to that point, right? Like Ash says, how are the mechanics? Like, don't worry, like, trust Trump, and Elon, they're going to figure it out to some degree. You got big balls out there helping people, right? People like him will ensure some of that stuff will happen. But I think we need to get away from this older system with watermarks and the older system, because the older system doesn't scale in the new world.
Well, and again, just real quick, Ash, because you brought up the 1,000-page bill, and that is a new development. We never had 1,000-page bills, in the early 1900s and before that. When we were reading Overruled, what did Gorsuch say? The average bill was like 16 pages, and now it's like over 800. That's insanity. So you actually supported my argument in getting back to the original intent of our founding fathers, of our Constitution. And a 1,000-page bill is not a 1,000-page bill to, I don't know, to fund some new military base. It's a 1,000-page bill to fund a military base, to fund something in Florida, in California. It's all over. It's like 10,000 different things lumped up into one bill. We have to get away from that bullshit. I'll agree with you on that 100%.
Yes. Next question over here.
I'm very sympathetic to Ash's operations approach. Like, I too want to know how exactly would that work? Because, G, what you were saying sounded a lot like that could devolve into mob rule by whoever has the Bitcoin is able to then control everything. And I can see a world in which not everyone has access to Bitcoin or whatever, and I think that's an inherent problem. It's a flaw in the argument. The other thing is that if we move to a system where Bitcoin, or the Bitcoin system, becomes the global government system, well, then we're looking at a one world globalist controlled system. And I would like to have a system that protects the values of the US, not one that could be easily corrupted by a global financial system that, of course, the wealthiest are going to be able to control and change the rules. And don't tell me that code will make it so that for sure nothing could go wrong with that. So I think I think operations is important precisely because it forces us to figure out those nasty details that prevent global corruption and evil people from taking over a good system that would prepare all of us to defend ourselves, keep our sovereignty, and protect our neighbors who might be defenseless, as Alpha was talking about.
Okay, you're getting close, right? You're getting close, and I appreciate you because you're asking those tough questions. You have to ask those tough questions, right? And so what is Bitcoin, right? It's a one world currency that offers decentralization, anonymity, property rights to 11 billion people, okay? And so don't think of like a one world currency as like, oh, this is a bad thing, because we kind of already have it through the dollar, right? That's sanctions, SWIFT, right? We actually control people through their pocketbooks through sanctions, okay? And so what we have now is we're exporting Americanism. This is the most Americanism thing you can ever think of, because you can't change the rules. I'm sorry, but if you do your research, you cannot change the rules of this protocol. As long as it stays decentralized, as long as it stays secure, you are exporting Americanism to the entire world. You are giving everybody an open platform to collaborate and really eliminate these systems of control, okay? And so you're getting there, you're getting close, but you've got to keep asking those questions because it's important for you to get through the layers of propaganda, right? We have been propagandized, and so you have to fight it. You have to keep fighting through those layers to get to this other level, so.
Yeah, the idea that major democracy is a new idea is propaganda. It is an old idea, and it has been tried, and it's not all of a sudden going to work because there's a different underlying technology or a different protocol. The problem with major democracy is that it is mob rule. It's two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner, and it doesn't matter if that vote is on the ledger. The problem is in the dynamic. The representation is what makes America different. And you could say, oh, it's an old idea. We have to try something new. We have to try major democracy. Been done. And there's no representation of your interests in that ecosystem. And we can, make big, broad statements, but when we get down into how is it going to work in a community when there's a dispute over the water rights and the person who has a ton of Bitcoin, but they also have the water infrastructure and the ability to treat the water and the treatment plants, who's representing the people's interest in that community?
And if I can just add, G, I mean, this is the thing that I consider as well. I mean, considering the scarcity of Bitcoin, what happens when Bitcoin eventually ends up in the hands of a very few number of people? I mean, like Michael Saylor, you often quote him. I mean, he's got a ton of Bitcoin. Yeah, nation states holding on to Bitcoin. I mean, I suppose maybe that could be a reserve just to hold value. But if Bitcoin is meant to be used by the people, eventually people may end up having to sell their Bitcoin so that they can end up, buying goods and services or engaging in trade with other people. And what's the solution when a large swath of the population no longer has any Bitcoin and the people who do have it are the ones that would be making the decisions?
Real quick, maybe at some point, General Quast can come up and talk about quantum computing and the effects that that's going to have on Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin might not even be relevant in 20 years.
This is the future of representation panel.
I think what we're dealing with is a mass psychosis.
Well, just to put it to bed.
Mass psychosis of Stockholm Syndrome. We have the slaves protecting the slave masters, right? Because they want to keep that old system. They're so in love with that system of control and slavery. They're afraid to what happens if we walk outside and all of a sudden all these bad things are going to happen? No, we can't live with that mindset, right? We have to understand and do the work. You have to do the work, guys. No one's going to just come up here and tell you I'm doing. I'm trying to help you guys, but you have to go do the work. And a big part of that is go read the thesis called Soft War. I know General Quast has read Soft War. It's a 400-page thesis. It's not easy to read. But you need to read these things to understand what technologies can do to empower the individual. This is about empowering individuals. This is about exporting sovereignty, right? And this is about cleaning up all this corruption and basically rewinding everything that the terrible money has done to this world, right? We're reverse engineering the corruption, and the swamp at the end of the day will drain itself across the entire globe when we all hop on board this new protocol.
Got a question / comment over here.
Now, going back to what Ash said, this is about future representation or future government or whatever. I want to try to tie together a little bit. CanCon, you said something about the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, 1 representative, 30,000. So I thought, make it real for me. I live in southern Indiana. I have District 8. And if I boil it down for me, instead of 1 representative, I would have 6. Take that back to what Zach said. Live in my district. Be there. Be around us. I met with my sheriff candidate a couple of years ago to have a conversation with him specifically about the Second Amendment. I think it makes sense. G, I bought Bitcoin because of you. However, I'm not a computer guy. I don't understand half of what you guys talk about. You say it's something I can see or follow or do. I have no clue. I get into a point with my phone and I ask my wife, help me, because this just doesn't make sense. What is the transition? I think we need to look at something like a transitional piece to help people like us grasp these ideas as we move forward so we're not left behind in a mental state where we don't understand it. That really is where I'm coming from.
So just real quick to clarify, you wouldn't have 6 representatives, you would have 1 representative for every 30,000 people. So your district would be broken down much smaller, and it might be your neighborhood. I live in a big neighborhood. I probably have 10, 15,000 people in the small town that I live in. So that's how that would go. Good.
That's what I did. I took mine and broke it down based on 2020 census, and that means my county would have 6 different districts.
Okay,
based on the
that's your county though, not you as your individual district.
So I would, in my county, there would be 6, so I know my county, and now I got 6 people spread out within that. Okay, I got 1 person who's probably living not too far from me in that area that I could go meet with, like I did that sheriff 2 miles from my house when we met. That to me makes sense because I can grasp it and grow. And I've grown much in the last several years of being involved with listening to you guys. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Another question?
He's getting ready, so.
Okay.
Well, while we're waiting for that there, one of the other things that we haven't talked about yet is the party representation. And that is another massive thing that has gotten wildly out of control. Washington, of course, warned us of this in his farewell address. And that is something that I would like to see. I mean, obviously, me and Ash talk about, Act Blue and Win Red all the time and getting a lot of the money that's laundered through our own federal government and taxpayer dollars back into the parties themselves. That is another facet of our representation that is heavily skewing it, because you're taking two parties that are telling you you have to get into one of these buckets, and once you're in that bucket, you have to absorb all the shit that we're going to throw at you that you have to believe in. They're telling you that you cannot possibly be pro-life and also believe that, I don't know, give me something here that
Government shouldn't be involved in healthcare?
yeah, that the government shouldn't be involved in healthcare. There you go. Well, the government shouldn't be involved in healthcare. The general welfare clause, going back to that again, did not just say let's make it a welfare state. That was not Madison's intention with that.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I think we have another question.
Next question.
Okay, I agree with CanCon talking about trust being the issue. Yeah, trust is the problem. I'm only going to hit that really quickly because there's so many other things to hit. But when you're talking Bitcoin, that takes out trust. And that's a concept to kind of have to understand. You don't have to trust somebody, because when you trust somebody, they can rip you off. The difficulty with the conversation and trying to get this understood is we're at so many different levels. We're at understanding a high-level Bitcoin and starting to learn about it, and then trying to figure out, without bringing it together, this implementation. And I think one of the solutions to that is understanding it better. Read software, skip chapters 1 and 2. Okay, that's just the groundwork, that's the technical. Chapter 3 talks about power projection from the very beginning, basically, of time and first organisms that come out, okay? It talks about how survival of the fittest. And it sounds brutal, but that's how reality is. You got to understand, if you don't understand, taxes are collected at the point of a gun. You can't make that connection. It's kind of hard to understand that, yes, we have these civilized layers of protection, but it always does come out to that. Okay, so if we, basically, Bitcoin, if you look at it as energy, stored energy, which is what money is supposed to be, there's much more to it. It's only the first use case of Bitcoin. But if we basically are controlling our own energy, we're sovereign, if we have full control of our energy, when our representatives that need our energy to do something will have no choice but to represent us, because they can't print more energy. So I think trying to get that gap filled.
You've done the work, sir. You've done the work. I love it. Yeah, no, and so this is a gentleman that's done the work, right? He understands that exporting sovereignty through this open source decentralized protocol that gives property rights to 8 billion people now have the authority to put their people in check. You can no longer just print over me, because the more you print, the more value of my asset goes up. And for the gentleman that doesn't understand, coming to these things are how you understand these things. Come talk to me. Come have a conversation with me. I'll send you videos. I offer consulting. There's a ton of free resources out there. And so, but this is the gentleman that's done his work. And I applaud him, because it's not easy to go and actually read that book and understand it. It's difficult. And so you can download the book for free at 1776.love, or you can buy one on Amazon for $50. Okay? General.
Yeah, thanks for this conversation. I guess my question would be kind of riding off of what CanCon asked about, and that's quantum. And not to go into quantum, but to ask this question. You're trying to figure out whether there is a new way of dealing with human nature in the governance of all of us. What is the minimum amount of government we need now, and in what form? Human nature is not going to change, and that's why this argument is tough, because the one thing we do know, that every new invention of technology that ushers in a new model for managing human nature, which is sinful and potentially evil in the pockets and corners, somebody always figures out a way of using it to enslave us. So quantum, for example, has the potential of breaking every Bitcoin code that has already been. Somebody will figure out a way to still make it effective. But this journey of cat and mouse game with technology will be enduring. And so I guess my question for the panel, as we're talking about the future of representation, is what outcomes do we want? Because we're not going to be able to figure out the structure of what G Money is talking about in today's panel. We're you know, the Federalist Papers that had this same argument about why we had a representative government you know, it took years of discussion. And it's going to take time to do the education. But for this panel and the power of the Badlands network going out to the world and helping teach and educate, what are the outcomes we want as we discover, is there a new model for governance that is more effective with less corruption for a time? And then somebody's going to figure out how to distort it and use it as a weapon against us, and we'll have to do it again and again and again. But for now, what can all of us do from this panel? What can we do as we go back to our hometowns and spread the word about this topic? What is it we want in the future? And then have smart people show us ideas, and then we, the people, decide how we modify it to be something better than we have now. That's the question. What do we do with this power that's going to go out this afternoon back to their hometowns?
I mean, for me, ultimately, the goal is peace and prosperity. I want the needs of the nation to be taken care of on an individual basis and on a macro basis. But this is one of the reasons why I think that service should be compulsory, because I want people to have a stake in how that happens specifically. I don't want people to be depending entirely on someone else to make the decisions for them, or to tell them, you know, how things should be run or what you should be doing. I think that when you break it up, if we go, as the Constitution says, into a larger pool of representatives, then the stake that you have is going to be infinitely greater, and the power that you have to influence the person ultimately casting those votes for, you know, the decision making is going to be infinitely greater as well. And if every single person in the country in one form or another has a direct say in how that happens, then it can be really bad. But you as an individual can have an influence in what happens in your own community. And I think that that is the easiest way that we can get to a place of peace and prosperity, is through the direct participation of every single person.
Yeah, I think to answer Jim McQua's question, in terms of the outcomes, for me, it's the preservation of liberty. I forget who said it, but if men were angels, governments wouldn't be necessary, right? But men are not angels, and we're not going to fix that, no matter what the code lines read. And that's the thing too about the accessibility of open source, right? Was that well you can see what's happening in your government if it's all open source. You can read the code. Well, that means you have to learn a new language, and maybe several, because there's different coding languages and they're, you know, changing over time, and so that places an additional barrier to the gentleman who said, you know, I need help with my phone, right? How am I? And that's the majority, right? It was a year and a half ago, I think it was only 16% of the country, America, had any interaction with cryptocurrency whatsoever. And that was including people that just had like downloaded a wallet, right? Not like big players. So it's the ability to access and to have what you're saying, direct say, and you know, we elections are one way to do that. Elections are fake, of course, and hopefully we can fix that. But I don't think we should place more barriers on the preservation of liberty, on our ability to exercise our rights. And this is particularly important to me because I live in Colorado, and I know, drink everyone, because I said Colorado. But Christians are under attack in Colorado in a big way, and that Christians being under attack is what founded our nation. And preservation of our ability to practice our religion and worship our God the way that we want, or the ability to put all your money in Bitcoin and do whatever. The liberty to follow your destiny and your path is what makes America great, because we preserve that for the individual, not for the collective. And that's the outcome I want. And that's the mind shift. If we think about taking the collective power in this room and going back to our home states and back to our communities, that's my hope, is that the mindset for individual liberty and a return to the ideas that made this country great.
So for me personally, obviously elections are the number one thing. But for me personally, we have a situation in the country now, and we have for, probably the last 50, 60 years, maybe going back to maybe the 1930s, so maybe 100 years almost, where we are no longer being ruled by our elected officials, but we're being ruled by the people that they have delegated their authority off to, that we have no authority over them whatsoever. They have so many rules and regulations, they don't even know what the rules and regulations are. And, for me, I want to get back to individual sovereignty, and as being an American, I have said I will give away my sovereignty on nationally and with the federal issues, but those are enumerated. And I'm not giving it away. Like, I don't consent to giving my money, and this is going to be controversial to some, maybe not in this crowd, but I don't consent to paying somebody else's medical bills or somebody else's retirement, even if you're contributing to that, because all that system does is give the private corporations, hospitals, et cetera, pharmaceutical companies, and this is just focusing on Medicaid. It happens in every facet of our lives. There's a government bureaucracy that props up a corporate environment in every facet of the bureaucracy. I'm focusing on Medicaid here. And what does that do? That drives medical costs so high because the government just prints them and pays them for you. They don't bat an eye at it. $40,000 for an MRI or whatever the case might be. If we can reel that aspect in, and that's a massive undertaking, and President Trump is trying to do it right now, and I hope he's successful, and I hope whoever his successor is continues with that trend.
Yeah, so to answer that question, peace, abundance, and sovereignty. Like, that's the end goal of all of this. When Donald Trump was inaugurated, he said he came here to give power back to you, the American people. Now, when he said that, he meant it. Okay, he wasn't just fucking around. And what does that mean? What does that mean for you to have power? Imagine if every new political freaking scheme they came up with, new war, whatever, was a direct tax on you. Do you think we would put up with half the shit that goes on, or 90% of the shit that goes on? No, we wouldn't. We absolutely would not come out of our pocket to pay for more weapons for Ukraine. How many here would pull out more money for weapons for Ukraine? Anybody? One person? Right? Like, would that get funded? No, it's not going to get funded. So I think we got to change our thinking and understanding what Trump meant. What did Trump mean when he said he was giving power back to you? If you had the energy that you could voluntarily give to someone to go do something evil, would you do it? Of course you wouldn't, but you don't have the power. You don't have a vote. You have the illusion of these people in suits that talk a good talk, and they're on camera, and they talk about freedom. But really, they're just selling you a freaking bad idea, man, and they're making money on it. And I'm sorry, I got to be the guy to tell you.
Ash, to your point, I completely agree, and I think that one of the reasons that people don't really have that barrier where there's that opaque layer to how the system works is because they don't teach the system to people like they used to. I mean, like, civics is no longer taught in most schools. I mean, I can't think of any place that I know that it's taught.
G definitely didn't learn it.
Yeah, outside of like homeschooling and stuff. But I think that, that should obviously be something that happens. I mean, there has to be an educational component to explain to people, like, what liberty actually is. Like, what are the terms defined within the Constitution? Why is it that these things are written the way that they are? Because the only things that, we've seen it kind of explode in the last couple of years, but there's been this perversion of language and what things are supposed to be like, and how the United States is ultimately evil, I mean, that's obviously had a major impact on the way that people perceive things and why they think things need to change in a certain way. I see that also turning around, but you know, I believe that that would ultimately happen in the near future. I mean, President Trump has been very clear about teaching people to love the United States and understand why it is that we have the system that we do. But, you know, we have to remember that as a republic, you know, there are things inherent within the system that have to exist, and if they don't, then we will default to mob rule. And I just think that that is the absolute worst thing we could possibly do.
Questions over here?
I'm just wondering, with the new G-topia, how do you overcome humanity's inherent susceptibility to bribery, to influence, to bullying? How do you get past that in order to create an entire humanity of sovereign citizenry? I don't see how that's possible, because there will always be those who will bully, who will corrupt, who will bribe. And I don't understand, at least I don't see it in my mind, how that occurs. And just to give a case in point, a certain recent bioweapon, which certain people are still taking despite overwhelming proof that perhaps it's not a good idea. Thank you so much.
I feel like G-topia includes bullying. That's like part of it, isn't it?
It's an underlying component.
Yeah, someone told me I was way too nice in the last panel, so I figured I need to up the toxicity. So that's why I came out a little bit firing today. No, but it's a great question, right? Like, Bitcoin doesn't solve the problem of evil, right? It's not going to solve evil people. What we're solving is the incentive structure for evil to happen, right? Like, if you look at poor countries, if you look at the poor, if you look at the youth of our country, like, is it easier for them to actually like get a job, go to school, and maybe get a job? Or is it easier for them to like start an OnlyFans and just maybe rob people? Like, think of the incentive structure. But if you had a new system where people could be like, you know what, if I work hard for this amount of years, I can buy a house, I can buy a car, I can have a wife, I can have a family, like, we give them hope. The youth have no hope right now. They literally don't. It's sad. You get to go to a 4-year college and they're going to indoctrinate you, and you're going to come out with a bill for $300,000 to get fucking no job at the end of the day. Like, it's sad. And so, like, when I'm talking, I'm actually trying to talk to younger people. Like, the boomers in here, like, I love you guys, but you guys had a pretty good life. You guys had maybe single-digit inflation, didn't get robbed as much, and so you guys are comfortable. That's great. I love it. Like, fine. But, like, for all of you older people, you need to teach your kids this. If anything, take the message here from me, and you can call me crazy or whatever, be like, oh, listen to this crazy guy. You maybe need to learn to him, but like, teach your children this. Like, a lot of you, this isn't for you. I hate to break it to you. But for the gentleman that said, I can't figure this out, and Ashley said, there's all these new codes and you can't figure it out. Okay, go download an app called GART. You can upload a Congress bill and be like, give me the bullet points of what this bill spits out, right? And that's what the future's gonna be. A congressman's gonna have to digitize the bill. You can throw it in an AI and say, what does this actually mean? I'm not gonna read 1,000 pages, give me the main points of it. And you can be like, you know what, I support that or I don't support that. Like, that's what this is about. This is where we're gonna actually solve these old problems. But back to your point about solving evil, it's about solving the incentive structures that provide the ability for evil to flourish, okay? Because they've corrupted.
That was your cue, G-Money.
All right, I'm done.
Wrap it up.
No, they've corrupted the underlying value transfer of humans. And if you corrupt that fundamental underlying value of people to transfer value with one another, you corrupt everything else, okay? And that's what we're fixing.
I actually love that now. I'm thinking we need one of those.
We might have
people.
to. That's the cue.
Anytime somebody starts going on a long rant like Bernie Bro, we just start playing that.
Or just a bong, yeah, just hit the gong.
While we're working towards G-topia, in the meantime, we all have to live in the real world. And one of the things that I want to encourage everybody to do, if you can, is get involved with your local government. I ran for my select board seat. I've won it twice, despite the fact that everybody knows I'm the evil right-wing person. And you can have some influence on your town, your city, your district, your county. Get involved while we're working towards whatever they've got planned for us, which I hope is G-topia.
Yeah, and real quick to that point, and that's absolutely, being involved in your local government should have far more impact on your day-to-day life than the federal government would in years. But to that point, we're talking about the future of representation, and we don't even have a safe, secure way to elect those individuals. So What's up, man? I was hoping you'd get up
Hi,
there.
Chris. There we go. Okay. In terms of representation, I think that I'm maybe kind of a hybrid of some of the positions up there. I think that technology has a lot to say potentially about direct democracy that maybe we couldn't have gotten to before, which is not to suggest I think that direct democracy is the system we need. But if we think about how our data is accessed and how much of it is accessed and how it's all probably compiled in one place and analyzed via algorithm and AI and the rest of it, there is somewhere a system that knows what the public actually wants. And if there is someone executing that, and I've flirted with the theory that perhaps Donald Trump is doing exactly that he has all that information and is proceeding in that direction and then trying to kind of shift and tailor where we're going, it then becomes a problem of the information that people are getting and the beliefs that they're forming on the basis of that information. So I just wanted to put that out there and see what you guys thought.
I like the idea, and I think the same thing. I think that, you know, everything that we're seeing right now has been run through game theory, through AI systems and everything else strategized. The only problem I have with that is, you know, if it's looking for what we want, you know, at the individual level, then you're kind of teetering with democracy. And in a democracy, you'll always vote for your own self-indulgence and you know, for your own benefit. And that's not always the benefit of the collective. So that's the only pushback I would have to that. Now, in terms of if there's something to kind of offset whether or not, you know, the ends justify the means kind of thing, then I'd be all for that. But just to say, this is what we want, so 51% of us vote for it, that's no different.
Yeah, I agree. And I thank you for bringing up data, because data is the most valuable asset on the planet right now. And we're, you know, flirting with the idea of transferring more. It's, you know, are we going to give our decision making, are we going to confer our decision making onto other humans, or are we going to confer it onto technology? That's the question that's actually being posed, but we need to be preserving it. We need to be keeping as many of our own our decision making at the individual level, then the community level, then the state level, then potentially the very few enumerated powers to the federal level. But as we become, you know, and we're already there, but as we're more digital, the data scientists talk about data exhaust. Right, that you have, like, you hold a supercomputer in your hand, and if you can, like, visualize, you have this stream, this, like, exhaust stream coming off of you because of the amount of data that we're producing. That's a very intimate profile of your life. It's where you go, it's who you talk to, it's what you search for, it's what your bank account is. It is the most valuable asset on the planet, and we should own it. I believe we should own our data, and I think that the ledger has some solutions for that. But we do have to get our minds there. And so, you know, obviously I don't think that we should be giving decision making to machines over humans. I think that we should be keeping the decisions with the humans. But it's an interesting question in terms of what role can technology play when it comes to because, you know, the more that we give to the more that we rely on technology for, the more of our, you know, intimate profile of ourselves we are giving to that technology, and by definition, the people that own the servers, which is, you know, like 4 companies that own all the world's data.
You know, and just as like a dystopian example of, you know, AI having an influence on people and perhaps driving their desires, there is a case that just was recently filed in federal court against a company called Character AI. It's like a chatbot program, and this like 14-year-old autistic kid was chatting with this AI on the daily, and the AI, in speaking to this kid about his discontentedness with his parents and his living situation, suggested that the kid kill his parents and essentially, you know, I mean, massacre his family and then run off with all of their money. So I think, you know, this is just like the worst possible example of how, you know, the AI may influence what it is that you think you want. I mean, would that kid have come to that conclusion on his own if it weren't for the fact that his teenage angst was being reinforced by this chatbot that he was speaking with? I think probably not. I mean, I think that if he was having real lifetime conversations with his parents and trying to have an intimate relationship with them, and rather than with a computer program, that it probably would have been very different. But I don't know. I mean, like, where's the line? What do you really want, and what does the machine want you to do?
So AI has become undercover federal agents entrapping American citizens by planting ideas in their head that they otherwise wouldn't have had. Oh, okay.
Essentially.
AI can't defeat Bitcoin, right? And so if you want to own your data, right? If you want to own your sovereignty, you want to own property, if you want to own authority, okay, you now have access to that. And, from hearing all of you speak, it should, this is the fucking coolest idea that's ever hit the planet. Like, this is literally divine in its creation, in the fact that it is going to provide truth, transparency, peace, and abundance for the entire world. Bitcoin is the Prince of Peace 2.0. Fucking full stop. And we need to understand that, because we keep getting bogged down into these lower frequency conversations about what if, right? Well, what if, right? We've been freaking just completely, brainwashed our entire lives. And now we have an option to move to this future, right? And so I think we need to really open our minds to that, because, look, I mean, you guys are here at the tip of the spear of the freedom movement, okay? And you're here for a reason, right? Like, John's devolution proofs keep coming, right? If the proofs of my shit didn't keep coming, I probably wouldn't be on the stage, right? But what do we have, right? Trump adopting a Bitcoin reserve, right? Trump introducing stable coins, Trump pushing AI, Trump, boom, 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 golden age, vertical vehicle takeoff landings, all this stuff he wants. He is bringing Tesla technology to the world, right? John G. Trump was the first one to access the Tesla files. He is realizing that technology that was hidden from us, that was repressed from us. And so it's all coming to fruition. And if you count the dots and you see the proofs, you can triangulate this plan. We don't know exactly what's happening, but we have a pretty good idea of some things. And you have people up here that are giving you that signal. I think we need to really focus on that. And the most important thing you can do, I'll end with this, the most important thing you can do today is learn about Bitcoin. Because it's not about number go up, it's not about money, it's about peace, it's about sovereignty. And this is Trump's line, actually. It's about freedom, peace, and independence from government coercion and control.
Globally, right?
Those aren't my words, those are Trump's words.
But globally is what you're talking about, right?
Globally, absolutely.
Yeah, because in the future state of G-Topia, nation states go away, right?
Absolutely. Nation states, governments become service providers
So
in the new world.
the Prince of Peace is basically the god of the global system that you're talking about, right?
It's truth and transparency, the ultimate truth that you can't ever change, no matter what government you like and want to be associated with, Ash.
As long as you know the coding language.
It's open source. Check it yourself.
You have to learn the language to be able to read it.
Throw it into Grok, Ash. It'll help you.
So now you're relying on the Grok devs to tell you what the open source code means. There's so much trust in your trustless system. Let's get a question.
Is Mitt Romney's handler
I have a quick question. My understanding is AI learns from what people tell it to learn. So how do you keep AI from being manipulated by dangerous actors that want to feed it information to further damage our society?
Open source.
I mean, that's the question to end all questions, because AI is only as intelligent or as ideological as the people who are programming it. And, as spectacular as Grok is, I mean, it has plenty of failings, and you can see that every single day on X. I mean, it will still answer questions from a left-wing ideological perspective. It'll still give incorrect information, and it's a work in progress. I mean, I think that there is tremendous potential in artificial intelligence, and I believe in many of the underpinnings of Bitcoin as a tool that will inevitably help the world to be a better place. But I just think that there are other factors that have to be taken into play And in terms of, loss of nation states, I don't think that that's the answer at all. I mean, I think that nation states are about more than just like the control of people. I mean, you've got cultural and societal norms that exist within specific nations. And I think that the preservation of that is vitally important because depending on where you're at in the world, people are going to be interested in different things. They're going to have different ideas. They're going to have different goals. But if we can agree that, liberty and peace and prosperity are the #1 goals for everybody, those nations can still exist and we don't have to end up killing each other.
Another question over here, and then I'm going to try to get a question from the chat, and then we'll do closing thoughts.
Okay, so super quick, to me, no computer's going to replace me. No computer's going to replace humanity. Humanity is way more important than a monetary system on a computer. And y'all can tell community is huge for me. I think that throughout GARTs I've made that pretty clear. So as far as the future of representation, that becomes us. And I don't mean you have to run for office. I don't mean you have to, go get a job in the government or whatever. It just means that building those communities, getting to know your neighbor, getting to out there and building our Badlands communities. And it doesn't have to be people who are watching Badlands. Just get out there, meet your neighbors, talk to them, have the difficult conversations, meet the other G's of the world, and have the heavy debates. Our country was founded on discourse, and it's time that we get back to it.
Why don't you guys just do closing thoughts?
Well, Plato said democracy dissolves into despotism, and it has done every time it's been tried. Our nation is different because it's a representative republic. I think that we should keep it, and it's been difficult to keep it, and they knew it would be difficult to keep it from the beginning. But to the point Zach made about education, it is incredibly obvious that it's not taught. That the reason, if you just ask, I think the majority of people would get on board with eliminating the Electoral College, and that's because they don't understand what it is or why we need it. And we have to get back to understanding that if men were angels, governments wouldn't be necessary, but men are not angels. And so when we collectively engage in society together, there are rule sets and there are power dynamics. It doesn't go away with a different consensus protocol because the consensus protocol is what drives decisions and resource allocation and how we organize our communities together. I love what Bunny said. I think we do need to talk to each other. I think we need to elevate the level of discourse in our nation and get the kids involved early in understanding why is America structured this way and why is it important to keep it. I also think that we need to go back to the way things were. We didn't even talk about the 17th Amendment and repealing the 17th Amendment, but that your states have a greater representation, thereby you have greater representation in the old way before it was direct democracy to elect your senators. So I don't think that we need to throw out the framework that created the greatest nation on earth. I think we need to get back to it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can say it any better. I mean, the United States is special for a reason. I think that some of the smartest people that ever lived came up with the foundation of what we currently have today, and it's had varying degrees of success throughout the years. But from my perspective, to make it work for the next generation and many generations thereafter, it is about getting back to those foundations and simplifying the process, and most importantly, educating people how it works and giving everybody an opportunity to take part in that. because right now, too many people don't understand how this government is supposed to operate, why it is that certain things have happened, and much of that has been due to the fact that it's just easier to lie to people. It's easier to take advantage of them if they don't understand what it is that you're actually doing. So removing those opaque layers, getting back to the founding documents, and perhaps repealing quite a bit of what has been layered upon it in the meantime. And I think that we can exist for another 250 years, and we will do it successfully. The United States is, we have existed this long for a reason, and if we can continue on with that in mind, then I think that we'll continue for another 250.
I agree. I think the future of representation is actually the past and getting back to the fundamentals, the foundations. If our founding fathers looked at our country today, they would be in absolute disgust. They fought a war over a small tax, and here we are, overtaxed, tired, beaten down. You know, to what Alpha was saying last night during DPHF, you know, in regards to Codex. Which was absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, that should be a deal breaker right there. What was it, $5 trillion we spent on that war? You know, 20 years destroying our nation, and at the same time propping up the military-industrial complex and everything built around that. Our founding fathers would have been like, what are we doing? Get out there. Now, I'm not calling this to violence because we have allowed ourselves to become the slaves of the state. And if we're slaves of state, the only thing you have to do in order to push back and defeat that state is stop being a fucking slave. And that's where I absolutely agree with G. But I think we can get back to that if we have free and fair elections and we have equal representation that we choose, not who the Republican Party or the Democrat Party and whoever's handling them and funding them. I think we can get there. And G, I've always said this, your extremism on this, and you know, I agree with a lot of it, is not off the table for me. So that's me. I want the pass.
Love it, love it. But to your point earlier, this is all about culture. Our culture is being decimated. Your communities are being attacked and decimated on the, look at the news every day. You don't have to like be a rocket scientist to figure out how bad it is out there. Mass shootings every day, your kids are being poisoned with daily propaganda from the devices. You think you can compete with the dopamine that comes out of a cell phone? Sorry, lady, you can't. And to think Bitcoin is just a monetary system is a smooth brain, low frequency idea, okay? This idea is bigger than any of you guys can even imagine, okay? Because the only way to stop systemic oppression is through physical confrontation. It's not through voting, it's not through getting more representatives. Physical confrontation. Now, physical confrontation has been digitized in cyberspace to give humans the ultimate authority on what they want to do. And so really it's on you. Are you going to stand up or are you going to be a slave? Choice is yours.
Because everything right now looks fantastic. We're on a rocket ship. But if the Supreme Court comes back some way and says that President Trump can't charge these countries tariffs, we're in big, big, big trouble. Big trouble. So that's why just be like a squirrel right now, putting your nuts together, holding them, putting them aside, because other people aren't. They're not understanding it. They're not realizing that things look great, but it could change like that. Hopefully the Supreme Court does the right thing. If SCOTUS does do the right thing, then at the same time, you better make sure you've got a harness and a strong seatbelt because things are going to take off. So be ready either way. Have your hedge in case something happens, and then have your seatbelt and be prepared to take advantage of what's going to happen. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that's happening down here. Ron DeSantis is getting us really set up for November in terms of what happens after Mondami gets elected, which he will be. But that wasn't it. President Trump, there's like two or three more events in terms of where he speaks at. We're going to get to that in a second. Hey, did you guys know that U.S. life expectancy peaked at 78 years in 2014? It's been all downhill since then, and global life expectancy is declining for the first time in 30 years because people are aging faster than ever before. This is due to more toxins in the air, chemicals in our soil and food, and other external factors that are new to us. What most people don't know is that we can actually fight aging on a cellular level. You guys know I've been talking to you about kimchi, and kimchi is one of those things that can help you fight aging. Scientists discovered that kimchi actually slows down the aging process of human cells. The power of nature can outweigh the power of pharmaceuticals without the natural.
All right. Well, I guess I would like to start by. Are we good to go, John? Cool. I want to start by just making fun of Will Kingston. This is a guy who is a television character in Britain. I think he's like a news anchor. And he's getting destroyed on social media right now for posting a map of the United States, of Alaska and Russia. And he says, because of the way the maps are normally drawn, I've never realized that the US, Alaska, and Russia are almost touching. I am in shock. These are the people who are, and this thing is 30 million views. These are the people who are shaping our public influence, influencing our public policy, and they don't even know geography. This is why we look at maps on every show that I'm on. I'm like, every time I'm talking about a country, I pull a map up so we know what the hell we're looking at. It's amazing. Anyway, the future of the past, I think is a great subject to end with on the weekend because, as Bernie Bright says on his show, what's the tagline of your show? The story is a war, the war is a...
The war is a story, the story is a war.
Yeah, that is history in a nutshell. History is just the story of humanity, of our forefathers, and history is written by the victor. And we are not in a kinetic war, we are in an information war, and that means that there's probably never going to be an official ceasefire, an official end to it. It's just going to be continuing to go forever and ever. Now, hopefully the PSYOPs will win, but how do we then establish who the victor is, and how do we establish what history is the right history? Well, I think it's a matter of which side has the better storytellers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had floated this panel topic as an idea, the future of the past. I like my paradoxes, so that was part of it. But to Ghost's point there, I think if I skip to the solution, if we all probably agree in varying ways about the problem. I think Chris often says, you know, history is yesterday's fake news.
Fake news is future history. I think my mic's really loud. Am I really loud?
You're disproportionately loud, but so am I. Huh.
So, you know, I would agree with that if we're kind of all agreeing on there's a problem in terms of history really being not just written by the victors. I think that that's true, and I know that that's a common sort of refrain, but it's also codified through consensus. And the word consensus, I know the last panel was talking about consensus quite a bit, and I think it's important to really drill into your psyche that consensus has no bearing on objective reality in any way, although it visits extreme effects onto reality. So consensus in something being the truth has no bearing on whether or not that is the truth. And if I want to skip to what's maybe a solution, instead of just saying, history is all fake, so therefore disregard it, I sort of think it's like the first step to admitting, or the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. And I think that if you are engaging with history, with stories of history, with firsthand accounts of history, and Matt can talk more to this, and primary sources. I remember in journalism school being taught about primary sources, which is ironic. Those primary sources are people writing stuff down that they are claiming is happening at that time. And what's so funny is we, in this community, understand that most of the people doing that right now are either knowingly or accidentally lying about everything they're writing down. But like somebody writes something down in 1775 and we're like, this was the thing that was happening in November of 1775 because this guy wrote it down. Well, what if somebody digs up an Atlantic article in 2077 about Trump being a Russian asset? That's history, right? And it's a primary source, but it doesn't have any bearing on reality. If you admit that and understand it, I think you can then engage with what the histories are, which are stories trying to convince you of something. You can still learn a lot from them and from the world at that time if you try to get out of the mindset of learning the objective truth of events that happened that you will never be able to confirm.
Yeah, that was well said. Yeah, and thank you guys for letting me pop on this last panel. That's really cool. Considering especially that my heart and soul is really, really hoping to take part in the Manifest Destiny one on the first day. So this is, yeah.
You can just give your Manifest Destiny talking points and we'll work it in.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think that this is a very lawful way to weave it in. It's going to happen. Because at the end of the day, like you were saying, burning is okay, right? Or BB? BB.
BB, just tell me BB.
Netanyahu just took away the joy of saying that.
It's true, yeah.
BB is the preferred
You
nomenclature.
took everything I've worked for.
Yeah, okay.
He also goes by flaming, too.
But like you were saying, there is a question of the stories that shape us, shape our identities, and as we shape our identities, it determines what the future will be, right? Because what we see is our limits. A lot of our limits, there are some objective limits, you know, that if you're in a desert, there's only so much water to go around. You can only last so long in a desert without water. That's an objective limit. But a lot of the limits that we have are intellectual. We think that we don't have the confidence to lean into the unknown and learn something new, so that lack of confidence causes us to retreat into ourselves or into our comfort zone, at which point we won't be able to be the better part of ourselves that we could have been if we had a better understanding of the terrain, a better awareness of our potentials, of our creative powers. And so when we look at our past from the standpoint of the battles to overcome challenges and leap outside of our limits to make life better for our kids, which comes with risk, which comes with sacrifice, like all the founding fathers understood, all of the people who fought to keep the Union intact in the 19th century, they had an idea that their life was given meaning by virtue of providing for something better for the next generations to come into the infinity. And so when we appreciate that, we can awaken that part of ourselves. But when we have stories that are given to us in our crappy textbooks and whatever, narrative controllers, the gatekeepers of our history that make the American Revolution sound, as Canadians are given in schools, the story that was just a bunch of belligerent assholes who didn't have the patience to just wait for the crown to give them freedoms. That's the way that, we're given these really shitty stories, that the American Revolution was actually a bit of a mistake. That the Civil War, it would have been better that the Civil War just break up because America was a hypocritical, self-contradictory beast of slavery. So it should have actually just fallen apart, if the world was just. And so people lose the ability to really appreciate the nature of the battle lines. But if you can introduce a better reading, which touches at Putin and Trump, they just met. And undoubtedly, everyone's focus is now on the question of the Bering Strait, which is the same thing that the networks around Abraham Lincoln and Tsar Alexander II were negotiating, extending rail lines through the Bering Strait after Russia saved the Union in the midst of the Civil War, which would have resulted, without Russia, in the total collapse of the American experiment. And the discussion after America came out was to extend that rail through the Bering Strait, which is why Russia sold Alaska.
Did you see Putin was talking about that?
He was talking about that.
Yeah. Dude, you think Putin? Yeah, I think Putin is probably listening to Matt Aird a little bit.
I don't know about that, but that'd be cool. But I don't know. But that would definitely change the value of the past, because right now, as long as we stay on a fallacious narrative that denies the existence of that objectively true occurrence in history, the value that has on shaping the present is very low. But as soon as we acknowledge that was a dominant set of ideas that were fighting, though they were sabotaged, for the future that didn't happen, if we do and start acting accordingly to revive that again, then the value of that period as far as having an active causative power on our present and future circumstance is going to increase a lot. So it's just a fascinating idea about how the past can change according to present decisions about the future.
Absolutely. First, I want to say is whatever BB has in his leg, it's fucking contagious. Because my leg just wants to start dancing right now.
The Jimmy leg.
You got to put that lotion on it.
I want to start off with a quote real quick, and it comes from the famous George Orwell, 1984. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. And when I started to dive in, what is he saying here? or at least what am I getting from it? And everything that, like what you're saying is so important, but then the part that concerns me is the truth of the history we're being told, is it authentic? Is it real? Is the history we're studying real? And if we can go on present day, the stuff that the current lies we see, then how can we trust the history that we've been told to build this culture like you're talking about that's so important? And the only thing I really could come up with is the only thing that we can absolutely know is true to even a point is what we're actually living in right now, the present moment. But then what he says, he controls the present, controls the past, because we dictate who the villains are, we dictate who, all that stuff. And so how do we make sure that the propaganda of today doesn't become the curriculum of our great grandkids? And that's kind of where I hope I get the answers from you guys today on this panel.
Well, I'm really glad you said that, because that kind of leads into kind of how I wanted to start things off. I think that we have to figure out how to operate in an environment where there is no trust and no reliable information, because that's the actual state of things. And so we have to figure out how to operate within that. And that's not how we were conditioned to believe our world was. We thought that we knew a bunch of things, this is how things are, and then we operate within that. It turns out a lot of that's not true. In terms of the history of the past, I think maybe Matt Ehret and I talked about this a little bit in Plymouth, but I think first you have to consider what the past is to the extent that we can know it. And I know it's cliche, but the idea that history repeats, I think, is extremely valid, because if you understand a control system that just is real, the idea to maintain that control is to have the people constantly going through the same emotional states based on the same experiences as they're communicated to them. And, BB and I talk plenty about story structure on Story Hour. Story structures are consistent because the stories are meant to guide people through in a way they understand, giving them the emotional, positive, negative, back and forth throughout the entire story. And so the interesting thing about that is that there's ultimately a limit to how far that can be stretched. You can change all the details, you can change all the characters, but the story structure is going to remain the same. The same stories are going to be told over and over and over again. And part of that is just that human nature doesn't change. And so when I'm looking at history, when I'm thinking about the past, when I'm thinking about what the future of the past is, hopefully it's that understanding that underneath all of that, we understand the repeating patterns, and then inside that, I think, is where we can actually find something to hold on to.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned story structure and repetition. That's obviously something I'm really interested in. And something I'll say on Story Hour sometimes, Chris and I will do like a big movie that everybody knows and has seen, like Braveheart a few weeks ago, but then we'll do something neither of us has even seen, like Badlands last week. And experimental, right, to be generous. There's experimental films and books, etc. There's sort of mainstream ones. But what Chris is saying is whatever your subjective opinion is on a piece of art or a story, there's a lot of people that they really like nonlinear narrative structure. You watch a movie like Memento, and cinephiles know that movie, and it's told in like a reverse narrative, and you've got an unreliable narrator, and it's really interesting and engaging. But no matter how genius a piece of fiction that is, to Chris's point, it is objective. It is never going to map onto a large number of people. And that's why I think there's this, the narrative structure is so important to understand, because I think people invert the order of operations. They think, well, the narrative machine is so powerful that it can make people believe anything. Where to Chris's point, what's actually going on is they've just figured out the types of stories that human beings attach to. And to your point, there is repetition there. We actually even saw examples of this in Brad's documentary, Codex 9/11. We saw many examples of it, but the one that stands out to me is the political films, the propaganda films he was showing about World War I of the Germans being ogres and the guys, you know, taking the baby and throwing the baby on the ground, and then he juxtaposes that with the Iranian baby story, et cetera. And it's like, it's not because they're lazy, it's not because, you know, they don't have any better stories, it's because the more cute they try to get with a story, the more experimental they get, the fewer people are going to pay attention to it. And I guess I would turn this around, and I think Donald Trump has actually given us some hints as to how to win that war of stories, or at least fight in that war of stories, which is that he understands narrative structure just as well as the enemy. And I think the problem, one of the things I've thought for years is the problem patriots or honest people have had in combating the media machine is that the media machine is lying, but they are utilizing story structure. Truthers are telling the truth, but they are not telling stories that contain the truth in them. Donald Trump came down the escalator and started telling stories, right? Like, and he then started explaining it. You guys all know I got a kick out of it in 2024 when he was explaining to all the podcasters interviewing him in asides why he spoke in asides and why he was doing that. There's a lot of stories I told in that aside, and if you were paying attention, there's a reason I do that. And you know, I think he's telling you that there's truth underneath what Trump is saying, but he does embellish things all the time, right? He's like, they're coming across the border and everybody's getting raped and killed and whatever, and then people that are there are like, I mean, yeah, you know, that is going on, but like, not everybody's getting killed and raped, and like, that's not objectively what's happening. But his intent is, there is a problem here, and I need to tell you a story to get you to pay attention to this problem and want to solve it. So we can use that same thing, and the great news is, if you're using the same story structure as the enemy because it works, and your story happens to be true, then it's gonna win on a long enough timeline.
Drink.
All history is interpretation. My interpretation is the truth. That is history. Like, I'm being cheeky when I say that, but that is the essence of how history, once you understand that every version of history that's ever been told, that is the spirit of it, is that all history is interpretation, events that have happened in the past that we have various degrees of records of, and then somebody taking all of those pieces like data points and then weaving them together into a story and telling that story the way they want it told, that is history. And if you approach it every single time with that understanding, that you probably maybe aren't even being lied to in a malicious way, maybe the person just is telling you the story doesn't understand the nuance and is maybe missing some of the nuance there. That happens as well. I mean, I maybe could be guilty of it. I would never admit to that, but I could be guilty of that.
Same.
Yale Law School, for example, on their website, they have, I think was it James Madison? During all the Continental Congresses, he was the scribe who wrote down every single thing that every single person said in every single Continental Congress that the Founding Fathers held. So we actually have a written record that I think you can find on the Yale Law School website of, and it's like his handwritten notes, of every single thing that was said back and forth, all the intense arguments, all the debate. You take that, you can combine it with the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, and get a really good idea of like what each person was trying to forward in their arguments. That doesn't necessarily tell you what their specific intent or motivation was, but you can glean a lot from that. So that would be an example of a really, really good primary source because it's actual written dictation of every single thing that was said. But yeah, I mean, like, is a CNN news article about the Putin-Trump summit in Alaska, is that a primary source? I would say absolutely not. That's not a primary source. That is an attempt at documentation of an event that happened and somebody's interpretation of that event from a distance.
Yeah, right. On the issue of like storytelling, narratives, and just how that connects to the shaping of objective history, because like we are here now, a lot of people would say there's no such thing as progress. A lot of people believe that progress is totally subjective, right? That what's good for you is different from what's good for this person, which is like pure cultural relativism. It's a pandemic, especially among younger people. But I would say that there is such a thing as progress, but you have to have the right standards. And some people might fight and even be willing to die to stop progress from happening, as we see a lot of like young eco-terrorists being radicalized to like, you know, blow up pipelines and other things, because they really are, it's a spiritual affront on what they've been trained to believe is natural, which is that human beings are a pollution, we're a cancer. They've been given stories that have convinced them that we're a cancer, and that every time we make something that's going to make life better for humans, we make life worse for nature. And they believe that there's this dichotomy that cannot be bridged, and that if you have progress economically, you have to destroy nature. So it drives people nuts. But the fact that we all are here, and we have definitely enjoyed the fruits of progress. We have, you know, life expectancy, which is very different from people living a century ago that might have, on average, lived till maybe 42 years of age, where in this part of the world, maybe even less on average. Now we can expect to live maybe 77, 78 on average, you know, hopefully over 100, if we treat ourselves right. That was made possible by the discoveries and application, the choice to make discoveries, the choice to fight against, you know, priesthoods that want to keep things under a system of control and then apply it for the benefit of people through all sorts of things that involve just having access to abundant electricity, water, things like that, which were not taken for granted centuries ago. So, I mean, I guess the question is, how do we get the story of how the ideas were fought over that made progress happen, that helped society move out of our limits and into states where we had better actualization of our potential to make life better, to have more access to our deeper human sentiments that you couldn't if you were just working as a feudal serf for 14 hours a day, right? You couldn't access your deeper psycho-spiritual powers. So that happened with a fight. The oligarchy never gave anybody those things. That was always a fight. And the fight was whether or not humans are based upon, are made in the living image of a God, of a creator, with a divine spark that is equal in all of us, that has to be like cultivated, or whether we're just made in the image of mud to be managed by a master class that lords over us and tells us stories to keep us, you know, more in, that there's like sea monsters beyond the horizon.
Plato's Cave.
Plato's Cave, yeah. So we should just stay on the plantation, right? Don't venture too far. Stay in control in your district, which was feudal. That was the feudal norms. So there's a battle throughout history over like, well, what types of sets of ideas of the nature of human beings, the nature of God that made us as the creator and the created, and they're not all in agreement. But how do we like investigate that? And a mentor of mine who taught me a lot about how to investigate the transcendental ideas, which are not material, but that shape material reality, he made the point to me that you could learn more of the truthful causes of what made Rome collapse in the 3 plays by Shakespeare, Coriolanus, Julius Caesar, and Mark Antony and Cleopatra, than you could in the 1,000-page book by Edward Gibbons on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And it's true. There's a lot of facts in Gibbons, tons of facts, but there's no truth. He diagnoses it as being just Christianity's appearance was not successfully destroyed. And so if Rome was just able to smother Christianity, it would have been the forever empire. That's partially true, but Christianity was awakening a human sentiment, which he doesn't talk about at all, that he despises, because he's working for the British Empire that's trying to figure out how do we make a new Roman Empire that will live forever. Whereas Shakespeare's looking at, well, what were the tragic flaws in Julius Caesar, in Pompey, in Mark Antony, in Cleopatra, in Coriolanus earlier, that resulted in them becoming the worst part of themselves because they thought they knew things that they didn't know. And they abided by presumptions and prejudices that led them to self-destruct and destroy all of this glorious potential that the Republic had as it slipped into becoming an evil empire, right? So there's that aspect of like storytelling as well that I think has value, and I don't really know exactly how to apply it in our current circumstances, but there's definitely a way to do it.
Absolutely. You know what?
Yeah.
To tap on that and what Ghost brought up with interpretation, and that's where my biggest concern comes in. You have, you know, big tech's going to decide, you know, who gets a voice on a platform. You have media companies that will frame the story. You have the institutions like the colleges and all that, which will dictate what's going to be taught. And you have the intelligence agencies on what's going to be declassified and what's not. And all this is the stuff that kind of shapes what our current situation is. But I think this is where the technology, and as technology advances, that's going to be what we should weaponize. Because if you look back to like what you're saying with Julius Caesar, and understanding that the stories, that perception, I mean, we still have to rely on people's words. We're very limited on how we get to build our interpretation or perception. And if you look at where the future is going, like how much stuff is caught on video, how much stuff is caught on audio, I think that's why it's so paramount right now that despite all these entities that are working against us, we have to create documentation that the future generations, when they go to have their perception or interpretation of it, they're more accurate than what we could have been going off the stuff we've been studying for the last 100 years or 200 years. And I think, and if you look at like Brad's video, when 9/11 happened, did they anticipate us having access to information so fast and being able to do this? So they didn't incorporate, somebody had asked the question, well, why didn't they incorporate more truth? Well, because they didn't anticipate that. And I think that's going to work to our advantage with technology. So even though we don't know exactly what technology is going to look at, if we look at our responsibility right now for our generations is to document as much as we can through the way we see things and as the way things unfold, I think we will be setting up many generations from now to have a more accurate reading on what real history looked like.
Is there a question? Yeah. 2 questions from the chat here. The first one's for Burning Bright, and it's from Mrs. Bright. She's wondering why you are wearing a shirt with such a large stain on it. And she's wondering if you could stop embarrassing her so much.
Fair, very fair. Is this stained? I didn't. Well, honestly, I didn't bring enough clothes. And I will admit that there's already reusing happening, and I've only been here for like 3 days. So Mrs. Bright was not involved in the packing process, which she easily could have been.
We can tell.
If she was more dutiful.
Also fair.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm just saying, it's kind of her fault.
Okay. Do you want like a sweatshirt or something?
No, I'm good. I want your tassel.
Do you want a jean jacket?
Be careful, he's going to get a stain on it.
It's a lotion stain.
So, yeah.
I went to
bring you
the
some
same.
lotion, a
I
little
went
bit
to the
alpha.
same. I went to the same convention as John last night. So,
Second question, this is a real one for Chris from Polymathanon in the chat. Revisiting your concept from previous GART and your channel of informational time travel, can you expound on how that topic kind of overlaps with this current one?
Well, sure, and love Polymathanon, so shout out to him. The informational time travel thing, to explain it as quickly as possible, if you were a person who took the COVID vaccine in 2021 and found out in 2023 or 2024, you finally came to terms with the fact that that was a terrible idea, you have been living in an informational past relative to that idea for that entire time, right? You could have known that information at a much earlier date, and your ignorance of that information has made you make decisions based on bad information for that entire time. When there are problems like that that can be resolved, if you're able to actually kind of unwind through those beliefs and resolve those problems, you can move yourself informationally much closer to the present tense, to real time. And I wouldn't suggest that that's an achievable goal. It's more of an abstract ideal that we can work toward. The only God lives in real time. And below that, there are still people with tremendous access to information that we can't get close to. I believe that Donald Trump is living in a future informationally relative to us. He knows what's going to happen in a year or 2 years or 5 years because there's some level of control and consistency that's able to bring those futures into being when you are in a position of control. And so, it's important, I think, to go back through our history to bring it back to the subject at hand. I think that whatever we can do to understand that, and I think that this conversation is great, to understand that just because it is called history doesn't mean it's true, and we actually do have the tools to remove, maybe not all of that, but some of that.
I love that concept, and I actually wanted to piggyback off of it and maybe go even more radical. and say, if we're kind of all agreeing that what we've all been saying, it's impossible to know objective history, I would even steel man against the James Madison argument and say that if I want to be a dickhead, I can say, actually, these are pieces of paper that Yale is claiming James Madison wrote,
100%.
and that
Absolutely.
there is a claim.
Absolutely.
And I know you're not asserting it's objective truth, but that's what I mean when I say there are people whose brains stop at primary source. And even if we know for sure James Madison wrote that down, well, we are actually still outsourcing our trust to James Madison and what he was writing down. Maybe there was an argument he was like, F that guy. I'm not even writing about that. And again, who knows? But to Chris's point about time travel, and there's people that can listen to conversations like this and be like, well, how do we even orient ourselves? Chris and I talk about this a lot on Story Hour. And an episode that I always bring up because it kind of blew my mind, we were doing just a little mini version of Breaking History, was when we did Gangs in New York. And we just were reading about, whether it's true or not, the objective history of Lincoln turning cannons onto protesters in New York to compel them to kill other Americans in the Civil War when they refused to sign up for the Union. And I was like, well, that just doesn't really go with what the story of Lincoln is. I don't know if that's objectively true or not, but using the Civil War as an example, what I try to do when I'm looking at history, or even current or in the past, is playing a hypothetical. If human beings and if our society believes this history, is that good or bad? And I think that's a good question to ask. And I think the reason I said this is a radical take is I think you can get all the way to the point of saying it is less important to know what was true and false about the Civil War. It is more important to forward a story that is better for society. And some might disagree with that. What I mean by that is, if you engage with the hypothetical of, we've been lied to about the Civil War, well, then shouldn't the entire narrative of it be rejected, because that belief in the codified history of the Civil War has been used to set these templates Chris was talking about, even so recently as 2020. What were the BLM riots and all that kind of stuff and the George Floyd crap? These are essentially reruns, as Chris would say, but they're all built on that foundational narrative of America is a racist, evil nation at its core. Like that is deep in the mind of liberaldom, is that we have this shared sin of our past. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not in the way they tell us, but believing it is true has been catastrophic in terms of educating the youth about the future of the country. So it's just, I think if you think about, rather than trying to figure out what's true and what's false, it's just saying, if people believe this news story is true, is that going to be good or bad? And it's a sobering thought sometimes.
That's such a good point, because, all right, so there's a guy named Parson Weems in the American Revolution. He was like, I think a teenager at the time, but basically he was a pastor. Knew all the founding fathers, ultimately becomes a writer, publishing books under Benjamin Franklin's publishing house. Writes the first biography of George Washington, I think the first biography of Benjamin Franklin, a number of other founding fathers. Becomes the guy who makes up the lie about George Washington and the cherry tree, right? You've all heard that one, I cannot tell a lie. Now, he says, because he's been attacked by academics, by the same academics who went after Mel Gibson for making The Patriot and making all the British academics that y'all were talking about on Story Hour. Yeah, they attack him and call it historiography, basically lies mixed with truth to tell history. Now, Parson Weems says the reason that he made up some of these stories, these embellishments, was because he was trying to cultivate nationalism in this young country and inspire people to believe in somebody like George Washington, communicate a characteristic about George Washington that was universally understood among people who knew him, that he was this altruistic, very honorable person, and do it in a very concise parable. And that's why he made up the cherry tree lie. So you can steel man the argument that Parson Weems is a liar. You can steel man the argument that his intent was altruistic, but there was a reason that George Washington was unanimously elected the first president. There's a reason that he turned down the offer to become king. The oligarchs did offer to make him king. And that's because ultimately he was the person that was embodied in Parson Weems' parable. So is Parson Weems a liar? Is he a propagandist? Those arguments can be made, but to your point, was it a net benefit for people to believe that?
Right. And George Washington as well. Like, I know that he also really wanted the troops to watch plays, and especially the one he loved the most was Cato the Elder. And Cato the Elder is not, it's by Addison, and it's not the greatest play in the world, you know, but the thing about it, and it doesn't tell the full truth of who Cato was during the age of the Roman Republic, but it was played hundreds of times to moralize the troops and to also give these farmers a higher sense of nobility, because there were certain attributes in the characters in that play that exhibited these universal qualities of virtue, of courage, of these other things that you would want your citizens to have. So even if it wasn't literally the true recounting of what happened in those periods of the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic, it was framed in such a manner that it awoke something that made history, that made the impossible possible, because all of a sudden people found those qualities in themselves that they admired of the characters on the stage that were being presented within a certain story and within a certain context, that then created the Republic. It made this thing happen where a bunch of farmers were able to take on a battle with the biggest empire of the world, the most vicious, multifaceted beast that's still in power today in many ways, operating through the city of London, through the intelligence agencies that are tied to the old networks, the old secret societies of the cults of Mithra, of ISIS that were running the Roman Empire. It's the same continuity of families, of systems of control, of power projection, and of making the false appear true and the true appear false, that you had to cut through. And the only way you cut through it is you have to create real citizens, and a real citizen is not a subject, right? And we tend to dichotomize things, like people say, oh, America, we want an ideal story where it's all perfect, or the opposite will be like, people will then, especially on the left in the BLM crowd, they'll see the fallacies of those who try to idealize everything as being awesome, and then they'll say, oh, it's all crap, nothing was good. And these extremes, neither one is really true. We have to take ownership of the flaws and the sins of the past, right? The 3/4 or the 3/5 clause of a slave, that was a bad idea, but I see it was part of a negotiation to make something happen, to create a framework or platform upon which future reforms could be successful, to actualize the ideal of all men are created equal, that not everyone was moral enough at the time to understand or accept. So we have to own that, and to be a citizen in my mind, which is the aspiration of all great writers and poets who are tapping into that source when they're trying to convey whether it's Cato the Elder or whether it's Shakespeare or whether it's Milton or well, maybe Milton has problems, but they're always trying to figure out how do you get people to bridge the two aspects that seem to dichotomize us between our duty and our freedom, our desire for personal liberty, which coexists with the fact that we're not an island. We're born into a society that has its momentum, that has certain rules, like certain laws of nature, water, food, basic physical laws that are there. We need them. We need a water system. We need food production, agriculture that requires certain technologies, certain improvements to defend. We have to make sacrifices. We can't just all do whatever we want to do at any moment. Otherwise, any kid would just have candy all day and would never have anything. There would never be broccoli eaten ever. So how to awaken the sense that we should love that our desires and our duty should harmonize together in maturity, which I think is what a natural mature person is we know that we should want to do what is good. We shouldn't be whipping ourselves because we really want to just, be a beast at night and do our duty in an Apollonian sort of dichotomy in the daytime when people could see us, but at night we could be an orgiastic, beast of drug doer, whatever.
Like John this weekend.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, that's my point. Is I think stories that are effective, they don't have to be literally truthful, but they should awaken that universal quality of truth that'll be as true now as it was 3,000 years ago, 3,000 years in the future. It's always going to be true, that necessity to develop into maturity.
So do we put too much value in history then? And if we're not putting too much value in it, are we valuing it as important just as we're the current state that we live in? Because let's just say for whatever reason we had the technology right now, or to time travel, and at least optically, not interfere, but to visually see what the past was. And let's just say we found out everything about George Washington was a lie, and the opposite, and Lincoln. Would that change our mission and our pursuit of real sovereignty right now? And when I think about it, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter what I learn about the past. Like, I know what I'm dealing with right now, and I have a mission to go right now. So I'm kind of curious, because we know we have to understand history. At least this is what we've been programmed to believe.
These are good questions. These are really good questions.
Because we've been told, well, if you don't learn history, then the atrocities that happen in history, it'll happen again. So we've been programmed that we have to know it for that reason. But is that programming in of itself something that was meant to keep us in this bubble? Because if I look at it, well, the closest we can get to accuracy is our oldest living generation, what they experience. It kind of brings me to like that rubber band conversation we had, BB, that maybe history is not, the farther history gets out, the less important it becomes. And maybe the history we should be concerned with is what kind of stays in that rubber band and traces us, because that's the most accurate one we have. And I don't know, I just wonder if we're putting too much value on the very old history, and if we're allowing that to kind of dictate how we move forward in the present. And if that's the case, then are we using information that we just, the good discussion you guys had, are we utilizing information that we just are relying on trust?
Yeah. Can I commission Chris to answer this? Because one thing I thought of another one of the things you talk about is the idea of withholding belief. And I think that I don't know, that's what I thought of when he was asking these questions.
Can you like repeat the core of the question just quickly?
Let me, I think, set you up here. So to your point, we don't want to be so beholden to the past that we become enslaved by it. And if you look at like the whole BLM like woke movement that happened during Trump's first term, that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to like point at all the founding fathers and say, well, this guy owned slaves, and this guy was a racist, and this guy was a bad guy, so therefore you should all be ashamed of your history. You're bad people because your founding fathers were bad people. Tear it all down. And then everyone found themselves in a defensive posture trying to defend the founding fathers against, slander, basically. I mean, defamation. So how do we talk about the past without becoming beholden to it? How do we not become prisoners of the flaws and embrace the humanity of it? And where I would get to is I would just say that truth is not afraid of discussion. Truth is not afraid of examination and scrutiny. And these information ghettos that you were talking about earlier, those are created through lies, like the vaccine stuff. There are all these little information ghettos that people are living in because they're being lied to, these malicious lies that are being spread that people accept as truth. And the best way to combat that is just to have debate and discussion like what we're doing right now, and not shy away from that, because what Donald Trump's doing right now, forwarding all of these conversations that a lot of them are making people really uncomfortable because they're addressing things that historically were not things we always talk about. But the truth is not afraid of discussion. The people who are panicking right now are the people who I think are the ones not being as who are not being as honest about things. And ultimately, if it comes down to debate and discussion, I'm not afraid about where that's going to lead. I mean, are we really worried about what information might be put out in the battle space from more discussion? I don't think so.
So, in terms of how much stock we put in this stuff and how much it plays into our decision making and whatnot, in the course of the discussion, I was thinking about something that I used to say on my podcast in the intro. I used to say that truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality. And I've written about this extensively. You can find it on the Substack. But the short version is thinking about stories that have consistently mapped onto reality. I think that you can go back most primarily to the Bible and understand that that story for now thousands of years has remained true and relevant, and people look to that as a source and basis of knowledge. I'm actually in the process right now of reading the Bible front to back for the first time. And, well, thank you. I highly recommend it.
Isn't it crazy how relevant it is? It's like,
Yes.
it's crazy how relevant it is.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. And, you know, I kind of took an odd approach to it. I read the New Testament and then started back at Genesis. And one of the things that I see as like the stark difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, is that one is focused on the worldly and the other is focused on the godly. And I think that split exists and is findable almost everywhere. And when we understand which is going, you know, which of two options is going in which direction, if we consistently choose the godly direction, I don't think it matters how much our understanding of what might have happened before will play into our decision making. If we consistently choose the godly path, we're going to be making the right decision regardless of what happened 80 years ago or 200 years ago or 2,000 years ago.
One, I love knowing that you're reading the good book. If there's anything from this conference that's the greatest thing that I've heard, it was that. And I mean that.
I'm in First Chronicles right now.
And you'll enjoy the chapters where there's just a bunch of names you can't pronounce.
That's what I've been going through for like the past month.
That's where Tolkien comes in. That's preps you for the Bible.
But that concept of what you're living right now is kind of what I think, is that what Orwell was tipping towards? You know, the past controls the future, but the present controls the past. And if you look at your spiritual journey of that, if we look at our past, the sins, the way we grew up, it's done, it's documented, there's nothing that can change it. But if we allow that past to dictate how we move forward, we're never gonna get that end mission that we want.
Especially if we're using it as a justification for what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're in the present, what am I doing right now in that relationship with my creator, or in this context of humanity? That is what's going to push us forward. And that's why I'm saying, does history just become a reference point, or are we using it to guide us how we're going forward? Because if we're using that as a guide, that's where I think then all of a sudden we do become beholden to the people that documented it.
Yeah, your point there makes me think of, I guess tangentially, something I was saying on the Future of Work panel, which is, you know, in a strange way, I think taking Trump more literally than a lot of his audience does might sound strange, but an example of that is when he's talking about the golden age. And I think people are like, oh, a metaphor, like, you know, things are going to be good. And even his original slogan there, his original narrative deployment, MAGA, Make America Great Again, it's a story, right? It's kind of a declaration of narrative warfare, of saying the country used to be great. But one thing I sort of feel is that I understand why there's so much focus on the Founding Fathers. The more you read about them, the more relevant that is as well. Like, you know, you guys are talking about the Bible, but obviously for the United States, that's kind of like the mythic story of America, and even worldwide, it's obviously renowned, the whole revolution. But I think part of the Trump golden age push is this idea baked into what Alpha's getting to of unshackling us from the past. And I think it's interesting that he wasn't talking about the golden age early on. That's why I always am interested in Trump's narrative structure and how he changes it. When he came down the escalator, it was like, hey, stuff used to be really good here. And we can do that again. Like, we can get back to the past that was good. And isn't it interesting that then he loses the fake election and we go through the dark times, and when he comes back as Gandalf the White on First Light on the 5th day, he says he doesn't talk about MAGA anymore. Almost never. He talks about the golden age. So, and I think that that's a very intentional narrative and even spiritual shift of him saying, even the funny kind of comment of, you're gonna get tired of winning, you're gonna win and win, you're gonna say that we can't handle any more winning. And they're cute kind of things, but I think what he's saying is, you've got to unshackle yourself from the past, even the good things about the past. One thing I say often that sometimes pisses people off is, listen, if the Republic was gonna work, it would have worked. And it didn't work. In terms of the Founding Fathers, everyone's always talking about, we gotta get back to the Constitution. It didn't work. It didn't work. obviously the intentions were great. But I think Trump is kind of getting at that when he's saying, like, we're going to build a new world that's never been done before. And I don't think he knows exactly what that is. I think he's challenging us to stop being like, we need to return to this document that Thomas Jefferson wrote 250 years ago. I think he's saying, what's important to you? What kind of country do you want? Make it. Make that country. Make that republic. Make that new world.
Isn't that like, what's funny though, isn't that that's kind of what happened with the disciples and Jesus, where the disciples they knew this thing was coming, they knew this golden age was coming, they didn't quite understand when it was coming, how it was going to get there, similar to the moment we're in right now, or exactly the path of how they were going to get there. They're bickering about the interpretation of things that Jesus was saying, and then also getting really hung up on scripture and the Sabbath and things like that. And Jesus would have to stop them and say, guys, stop agonizing over the future. Stop agonizing and becoming beholden and shackled by the scripture. Be here in the present with me. Be here right now with me and focus on what we're doing right now. And he would get very frustrated with them because they were becoming beholden to not only the past, but also the future, agonizing over when is this thing going to happen that you say is going to happen? How is it going to happen? And he's saying, don't agonize over that. Agonize over right now, being here with me and making it happen. And if we all sat down and talked about things and discussed these issues on making the republic, as opposed to becoming beholden to a document written 250 years ago and implementing the exact words. Man wasn't made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for man. We weren't made for the Constitution. The Constitution was made for us. So we should be trying to embody the best elements of that and put that put the spirit of that into place, as opposed to the exact words that were written back then.
Well said.
We've had
we got some
lady
questions
waiting
back
to ask a
here.
question for an awfully long.
And Bibi, I just want to remind you, you invoked Thomas Jefferson. He's the one founding father that said a constitution only lasts 19 years.
Great point. Thank you. Base dude.
So my question is for Matt. I'd love to know your method for triangulating in on historical truth so we can create true citizens out of our kids, promoting that ideal of man as sacred.
That's a beautiful question. I guess in reading, so originally when I was starting to wake up to the fact that very dark conspiracies have been shaping my world and the popular narratives were garbage, and that was my 9/11 sort of wake-up call 20 plus years ago. I had a good impulse. I didn't have an academic background, but I had a good instinct to try to read the writings of people who seemed to be influential in this game, this disgusting game. So when I encountered the figure of Albert Pike, for example, as having influence in running, the Scottish Rite Freemasonry of the Southern Branch, of setting up the KKK, of being a Confederate general, and of, trying to oversee the empire of the Golden Circle that the slave empire was preparing to set up if they were successful. It wasn't going to remain the slave colonies. There was plans worked out by Pike and company to expand and create a new empire called the Golden Circle that people can Google. I was like, well, can I read Morals and Dogma? And sure enough, yeah, I bought the book at auction. I spent a lot of money, and I read the Morals and Dogma just to get a sense, okay, this is a person who made history. What did he say? How was he thinking? What kinds of logic he seems to be Luciferian, but he's using, when I'm reading his writings, a lot of nice words that might seem Christian until you get to the higher degrees, right? And then he sort of shifts his tone a little bit, his narrative tone, to start equalizing Lucifer with Christ. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, that's a funny little shift you're making all of a sudden. What are you getting at there? And so, I started doing that first for a lot of bad guys, getting pretty demoralized, and then I started looking at, well, who are the people who did make history happen in a way that avoided tragedies? So I started looking at people like St. Augustine, who kept Christianity from splintering up way before the Reformation, right? There was a big battle in the 5th century. And Augustine was a statesman. He was fighting in the real world, but he was also writing his ideas out in his Confessions in the City of God, and just getting a sense of, what is he thinking of the City of God? And I realized that his line of reasoning of the ideal of a natural order of mankind made into the living image of God, which is capable of expressing that through a type of law which is in conformity with God's law, which is premised on love. And that's the point in Corinthians that he really hammers at, is that when asked, by the Pharisees, what is the most important of the 10 Commandments, Jesus didn't answer any of those 10 commandments. He said, love yourself and love your neighbor and love God, right? But love is the key thing. And that not just purely erotic love or filial love, but agapic love, this general higher universal love that transcends all of it. And that if you could have a society, a culture that taps into that source, like Augustine believed, had faith that that was possible and even necessary, then you could understand what people like, when you read the writings of a lot of the founding fathers, they were studying Augustine, they were studying Cicero. You could read Cicero's Commonwealth, who was having a similar sort of Platonic dialogue about, well, are we capable of self-government, of being in a society of dignity that's premised on love and respect and thinking about the future, right? And so you have the reiteration of people drawing from this well, which the more I started looking into a lot of these core ideas, like the Bible originally was written in Greek, right? Or a lot of it was, at least the New Testament. And there are some higher ideas in the Greek world that we've lost access to, like that time is not simply one thing, but you have kairos, God's time, and you have chronos, the time of man, right? And in the mind of Augustine and a lot of these early philosophers who made this history happen and defeated the Roman Empire, they understood that it's not two separate times. They are, like, God's time is eternal. God sees all at all times forever. Human time is temporal. It's material. It's prone to decay and boundary conditions. We're all limited, and so what allows the chronos time to be animated by kairos, which pulls us into a state of self-perfectibility, where we can always make things better towards certain ideals without ever deluding ourselves into thinking that we can crystallize those ideals in the world and all of a sudden stop progress from happening. So the idea to form a more perfect union, I think, is a very poetic ambiguity, which is designed to be a poetic ambiguity, because otherwise, if you're a logician, and we talked about this at the last GART, if you're a logician and Aristotelian, you would see, it's either you're more something or you're perfect, right? You can't be both more something and perfect. Pick one, right? But the founding fathers were smarter than the Aristotelians, and they understood that no, you have to have this idea that we are only happy when we're going outside of ourselves, when we're drawing from the universal well of love. And the Manichaeans that Augustine was fighting against, that tried to presume that the laws of the spirit and the laws of the flesh were two different universes disconnected, that's false. And people often say today, yeah, it's nice to have these personal sentiments of love and agape and all these things for yourself and your family, but the real world is the world of Satan, of the devil runs this world. This is the world of Hobbes, each against all. Everything is a vacuum and a fight for survival against the other. And if you don't get them, they're going to get you. And we built whole geopolitical philosophies around this Manichaean, Gnostic sort of dualism, right? Where we allow people to live one way, but we don't presume that there's any connection of those laws of love that tie into the laws of humanity, which people like John Quincy Adams and so many others understood was false. You have to believe that humankind can achieve a city of God, and that we can have a brotherhood of humankind, that we shouldn't go chasing monsters to destroy, that we should actually have faith that we could be a beacon on the hill and awaken the nobler sentiments in others who will want to emulate our example by being just dignified people who are not beasts.
All right, got another question back here.
Hello, this is addressed to Matt and Ghost. I retired fairly recently. I was a railroad official, involved in the transportation industry and managing the Southern Pacific's military traffic management, moving military trains all over the nation, and for quite a while. And then I went to work for CSX. Maybe some of you on the East Coast have heard of that railroad. And Matt, I'd just like to make the remark that I think I spoke to you yesterday evening about it, but the Union Pacific Railroad just offered $85 billion for the Norfolk Southern. So this country is divided into East End and West End railroad carriers, the UP and the BNSF on the West End, and the Norfolk Southern and CSX on the East End. And President Putin made these remarks about the Bering Strait. And that's about a 50-mile trip from Yulin to Nome, Alaska, where you could literally join the entire continent of Europe. And that's already been done with the Trans-Siberian Railroad. That was built, 120 years ago, prior to the communist takeover. And it's a magnificent railroad. The gauge is 10 feet. They can take a lot of weight. And they don't necessarily get that far up to the Bering Strait. But the beauty of this is you can join two continents with transcontinental railroads now, and it's there, it's done. They just need to work out the details. And that has huge implications for supply chains, and I need to really kind of get my mind around it. It's
I mean, what you're describing is a huge symbolic milestone, I think, in the history that we're living through right now. Like, if that were to actually happen, it would fundamentally change a lot of things because of the logistics, but also because of the symbolism of us making peace, I think, with Russia, because Russia is our historic brother. Spiritually, culturally, we have so much aligned in common with Russia, and it's crazy what they've done, how they've turned us against them, you know.
Well, I almost think sometimes that they built it with this expectation. These people were so forward-thinking, and here it is. You know, sometimes it takes an entire lifetime it takes your entire career to see things happen. And when I started, there were 30 Class I railroads, and then with the Staggers Act in 1980, it's now whittled it down to 4 or 5. See, it has huge implications also for CSX. What are they going to do? They're going to have to get together with the Burlington Northern Railroad. And one of my fraternity brothers, perhaps the most important railroader of the last century, a man named Robert Krebs, is Harvard, Stanford trained, brilliant man. And he put together the Burlington Northern Santa Fe and and then he tried to get involved with the Canadians and build a railroad from LA to the eastern Canadian ports. This is going to connect just this alone could connect 150 ports. It's absolutely amazing.
We need to have him on Breaking History. Let's exchange information.
I got his information.
Yeah,
we're going to interview him. I'm on your page.
Okay, yeah. We want to have you on Breaking History to walk through this whole thing. Let's look at maps.
Well,
let's really flush this out.
Well, I'm really interested in your, I think visually, people think visually, or they have to listen ideologically or tactically to learn anything. So this Miro board thing would be. It'd be beautiful to kind of connect the dots.
Yeah, we'll make some maps too. Yeah, we'll do a show. That's important.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, man.
And saying that.
One thing I wanted to respond to there, two things. I agree with you about the symbolism here, and it goes back to, and Matt's done a lot of writing about this that I didn't get to in the Righteous Russia series, but I loved it talking to him months ago about these plans of the U.S. and Russia, from back in the day, and they were going to do all this, and we're seeing these reruns in a good way of rejoining or joining for the first time, really. And it really goes back to why have the powers that be wanted to program the U.S. against Russia? Because the joining of those continents is going to create an unbreakable mesh that no NATO or globalist bloc is going to be able to disrupt. And then one more thing would be, last night on the Power Hour, we've been talking about the Sovereign Alliance for years and saying that people who didn't see it coming are retarded, or they're just trying to protect their reputations. And a recent example of that is that even amidst all of the Trump-Putin narrative escalation, one of the things I've been saying on the shows is that all along the way, Trump and Sergei Lavrov and Dmitry Medvedev, or Sergei Lavrov in particular, were trading quotes back and forth, talking about that they were really excited for the massive joint economic projects that they were planning in the future, right? So one day, Trump would say, yeah, we're talking to Russia, we've got some big joint economic projects that are gonna be really big for the future. He better listen to me about Ukraine, right? Those are those choice to know will be yours moments where, guess what? If they're planning massive joint economic projects in the future, they're pretty sure that they're gonna figure out the agreement or that the deal is already done. I think that's it's not actually hard to see these things. It's just a matter of people want to see Russia as an enemy, so they're not listening to Russia say, we're really excited about our future as a partner to the United States, but we will nuke them for sure if they step out of line.
What was it, space and energy? Space and energy, yeah. So I went and looked it up. I don't know how I missed this, but the other day they announced that NASA wants to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. And the narrative that's out there right now is we're doing this because we have to beat the Russians and the Chinese, who announced 3 months that they want to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. And so the narrative now is that it's like a new Cold War to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. Now, whatever the truth of that is, you look back in history, like maybe when the recorded history, if that actually does happen, maybe it was actually a sovereign alliance like partnership all along. Right now it's like a competition. It's a war. It's like a war. That's the way the media wants to present it because they want us in conflict with Russia. But I think you're right that it's a deal.
All right.
Where the manifest destiny peeked in all of a sudden.
All right, boys. We got one more question over here. I got one question from the chat. I'm going to challenge you to keep the filibustering to a minimum because we're already like running behind. So from the chat, first of all, from Faith and Freedom, we're already in a place where we need to relearn history. How will we deal with the fact that we are currently creating a false history, aka we know about the plan, which is different than the narrative being deployed?
I'm not afraid of like how we're gonna do this because, as I said before, the people who have anxiety about the history being recorded are the people who I think are afraid of the truth. If we're going to create an even playing field and it just comes down to who's a better storyteller, and these are the people who are helping to tell the story, game on, bro. Like, let's go. Like, I'm not afraid of that. Like, we can absolutely parse this, and it's not going to be easy or simple, but I have faith that we can do it. So, again, game on.
I would just say I have my concerns. I honestly do. But at the same time, I have faith that we can do it. But I've recently done a series of documentaries that's ongoing on the hidden hand behind UFOs, because one thing that I've understood in my analysis is that there has been a long-running agenda for a few generations now to reset the world religions around a new narrative about what global religions have always been about, centering around the figures of extraterrestrials that either seeded humanity, have been there the whole time, interfacing with elites, and there's different spins on the theory that we can increase our access to channeling alien messages from a theosophical angle or from psychedelic drugs and psilocybins. There's drug cults around communicating with aliens, and it's really being pummeled and being normalized, even in the Congress. It's being weaved into the reason why JFK was killed. Anna Paulina Luna seems to be part of this network that's pushing the fact, or this story, that JFK was killed because he was trying to spill the beans on Area 51 and aliens. So he had to die because it would have weakened America against the Soviets. So there's all of these things that are also being weaved into conspiracy truth narratives that are attractive, but as far as I see it, dangerous Trojan horses that will undermine any good that we could do with the higher truth of the Great Reset and all of these evil things that we should know about. So that if that's successful, some of these are really, Hollywood has been part of the CIA operation for quite some time now. The CIA has had their tentacles putting in scripts that help shape the zeitgeist around adapting or accepting things we would normally never accept. So yeah, I'm very concerned that certain new narratives about our history might involve very dangerous concepts that a high priesthood might wish to control the levers of around controlling alien gods or AI gods or some combination of the two. That'll reduce our ability to be the best part of ourselves.
A quick comment. Since last night, I haven't been able to shake Codex 9/11 and Rob's comment about his son who's in the 101st, and General Quas' reply about generally how to deal with immorality in our world and our lives. I originally came up here because Bernie Bright said something about the Civil War and how we have a choice about how to, move from the past to the future. And I couldn't help but shake 9/11 and what we as a community are about to do. And it feels like we're on the precipice of where we were between 9/11 and 10/07/01. That there's going to be a line. Once Brad's documentary is released, people are going to react, and we're going to have we're at an opportunity to go godly or worldly with how we shape and lead the response to that. How will people respond? And so I just, I feel really at home with y'all here. I've been traveling for 6 months trying to find home, and the way y'all speak about this stuff, and you're seeing it differently than I've heard anywhere. And you're giving people a chance and a voice for a fresh start, a fresh future that is kind of Santa Claus-like, giving us hope. So more power to y'all. But I wonder if you think about how we want to help pave the way towards a golden future with Codex 9/11.
Well, thanks for that. And yeah, I actually was going to bring up Codex earlier. Somebody had the comment yesterday that I thought was fantastic of saying, you know, we're not waiting for the disclosure. Brad's giving us, you know, that version of disclosure right there. And I'd close with just saying something I'm really proud of at Badlands, and I'm very biased about this, and make our comments, and there's disagreements, et cetera. People come and go. We have our opinions of other people. They have their opinions of us. Something I'm really solidified in, and I think most people here are, is for everybody that talks about the plan and the Patriot Plan, at Badlands, we do not believe in passivity. We all have strong disagreements with each other about various topics, as you see at all of these GARTs. But the idea that we are sometimes framed as not believing in the plan, when I think that we as a community are the only ones pushing the plan forward at all, is absolutely absurd. And Codex 9/11 is a great example of that. It doesn't matter if there's a Patriot Plan of disclosure and all this kind of stuff. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But it is, you know, G-Money would call that a domesticated point of view, and he's absolutely right. We don't wait for permission to find the truth, not even from Donald Trump or Kash Patel or Pam Bondi or Q-Drops from 2017, okay? We get to decide what we talk about. We get to decide what kind of future we want to build. And lately, the only people trying to hold the truth community back are people in the truth community, and fuck that.
Should we do closing thoughts?
Quick closing thoughts, yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you all for coming. I think this was a great GART. I've had a blast. Great to see so many familiar faces who have come back time after time. I want to thank Mrs. Bright for all the hard work she does to put these on. And then I want to thank the great John Harold for putting Badlands together, for being the guiding force of what we do. And he has to take an ungodly amount of shit from a bunch of degenerate liars nonstop. And he takes it with a smile on his face and good humor. And I love him, and I know that you guys all love him. So thank you, John.
Love you, bro.
Yep.
That it?
Game on, bro.
Yeah, I second that.
I'm not going to ruin it.
Bernie Bright's right, though. I mean, Brad made the weapon. We know how to deploy it. Like, let's go do it. Like, game on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Effective. Or in a wheelchair, because I mean that's what I would do.
The stripes, they drove right over it like it was nothing. Those stripes, they're people's feelings. They're our stories.
Oh yeah, where'd they come up with this one?
What do you mean you live self-defense? I teach and practice self-defense.
Can't you tell?
Arrest him. Like, do it.
Arrest him. You know what I love? I love it when I make a 30-minute video and I forget to hit the record button. Let's do this. Again. Please like this video. It's the only thing I care about. I don't want your money. I just want to like. We're starting with this first because it's funny. And I wish I did this when I was a cop.
You're hurting me. Just don't lift. You're hurting me. Ow!
Effective.
Ow! Ow! Help! Help!
Losing
trinkets. Get out of the way. The stuff these cops do